I'm going to call to order the work session for Wednesday, April 1st, 2026. We do have a school board member, Dr. Martin, who would like to join us electronically, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cloud.
Dr. Martin previously notified the chair that she would need to participate in today's meeting by electronic means, and that requires us to establish a couple of facts on the record, and then the board to hold a roll call vote to allow her to participate electronically. So, Dr. Martin, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You're going to participate electronically today because of a personal matter. Could you just state for the record the nature of the personal matter?
I'm on vacation.
That's good enough.
Okay.
And where are you participating from?
It's called Sky Run Resort.
Can you give us the nation or the state that is in?
It's in Park City, Utah.
All right, with that, I'll turn it back to the clerk to hold a roll call vote to allow Dr. Martin to participate in today's meeting electronically. Dr. Martin will not vote, just the members who are here are physically present. A vote yes will mean to allow Dr. Martin to vote today and otherwise participate in today's meeting.
Basine?
Aye.
DeCalagero?
Yes.
Paulson?
Aye.
Slaughter?
Aye.
Thomas? Oh, that's right, she's not here. Buffalo?
Let me think about it. Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With that said, we're going to move on to 102 for the roll call. Ms. Tanner.
Basine? Here. DeCalagero?
Here.
Martin?
Present.
Paulson?
Present.
Slaughter?
Present.
And Buffalo?
Present, and I believe Ms. Thomas is on her way. We're going to move down to 2.01, School Board Goal 4, Measures 1 and 2. Dr. Rose?
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ms. McGarity to come to present and then address Q&A from the board.
All right. Good evening, or afternoon, I guess.
Good afternoon.
I'm all thrown. People are out of their seats. It's like I'm used to a structure. All right, I'm going to start with reading. Yep. We're going to start with 4.1, and we also have 4.2. So with 4.1, so good evening, Chair Moore Buffalo, Vice Chair DeCalagero, board members, Dr. Rose, and the public with us here and virtually. We're going to review the interim measures for Goal 4 today. Goal 4 is focused on closing achievement gaps while improving the reading and math achievement of student groups in Norfolk Public Schools. The interim measures let us know how we're progressing towards that goal throughout the school year. For Measure 4.1, specifically to monitor reading achievement of students throughout the school year, we formally use the results from the State Growth Assessment, which may also be referred to as the SGA. The State Growth Assessment is given 3 times a year, fall, winter, and again in spring, in both reading and math. Once students take the growth assessment, they're identified as either proficient or needs additional supports based on their final score at that time of year. In Goal 4, we use the percentage of students who are proficient at the time of the assessment in a focused student group and then compare the rate to a comparison group to ensure all students are improving, but also merging the achievement of the student groups. This interim measure looks historically at results on this test only as early as 2022 to 2023 school year. As stated in the initial state growth assessment overview presentation earlier in the school year, the results cannot be compared from earlier administrations due to the changing grade levels assessed and winter being administered only beginning the winter of 2023. This is why we only report back to fall of 22 for the state growth assessment. Because the interim measures are focused on student groups, I want to add a few additional details about the state growth assessment for some of the focus groups. Students with disabilities and English learners are allowed accommodations on the test to ensure they're able to access the assessment with as little impact as possible from their disability or language-based needs. Ultimately, this ensures that the results of the assessment provides information specific to the purpose of the test. I've stated this before, but I want to again remind the audience that something that was different this year on the state growth assessment compared to the past was that the fall growth assessment was given 6 weeks later than prior years. This means that the students had 6 additional weeks of instruction before taking the fall growth test, which could have impacted outcomes and must be considered throughout the review of the results. However, the winter results can be viewed as a standardized measure when comparing it to previous winter administrations. So now we're going to move down to the data table. All on the table. So I'm going to kind of go into teacher mode a bit here to work through this chart. In the table shown here, let's review from left to right with the long-term data provided. We're going to use the Black student group as an example. The proficiency rates on the state growth test are in each column from the spring administration of 2023 up to the current administration. For Black students, we see spring of 2023, which is going to start here in this area. We see 50.1 are proficient in reading. In spring 24, which is the next column, 49.8 are proficient, which is a decline. Then in spring of 25, we see a rebound with 52.1% proficiency. This is followed by the proficiency in fall of 25 with 59.2 proficient, and then again, followed by what our targets are. Our target for that student group was to be at 64% proficiency during this winter administration we just had. We can see that we didn't meet the performance target for the student group, and they were at 57.4, right? 52.4, I'm sorry, it's far away. However, we can also see that the student group is performing higher currently than they were spring of 2025. We see other student groups in performance over time either declined and rebounded, maintained and improved, or just continuously improved. So essentially what the idea is that we're trying to show is just that how this table is working, so we can see the student group in isolation, how their proficiency rates have looked over time. But then also at the same time, if we go down to the third row down, the white student group is the comparison group for the focus Black group. And then this is the next row down is the gap. It's the difference in the percentage points between the focus group and their comparison group. Again, moving to the right, we do have in that target, what are the targets that we want to see that gap looking like? So to illustrate the focus of the interim measure of reducing performance gaps, we'll review the first 3 rows, we did just the top row a second ago. We see reported that 52.4% of Black students were proficient in reading during this winter administration, and 79.3% of white students are proficient. The Black student group is the focus group, as I just mentioned, and the comparison group is the white group. When comparing the proficiency rates of the two groups, the difference in the percentage points is the proficiency gap. So this is where there is a gap between proficiency of students in those two comparison groups. The goal of this is to reduce that gap over time. What we see here is that 26.9 is what our gap is between Black students and white students. So that's kind of a quick down and dirty of looking at the table. We can see due to the red highlighting that we were looking for a 20% gap, and we have a 26.9% gap. However, we also have those targets that are also ongoing of students continuously improving. To make it a little easier, I have a sample chart here, graph here. So looking here at the graph, and I say it's a sample, most of the data is accurate data. The top purple line represents the percentage of white students who are proficient, and the bottom blue line are the percentage of Black students who are proficient in reading. The space between the two test administrations, that's the gap that we're talking about for this goal. So overall, this goal is looking towards wanting to decrease that space between the two student groups. So ultimately, if we want those two to come together. If you look to the far right, these are false data. They are here just for samples to show what it is that we're looking for the lines to do that are based on student proficiency of the two student groups. So the light purple would be theoretically what maybe would be the white students. The light blue line is a theoretical percentage of Black students over time, their proficiency. And what we want to see is that while both are going up, we also see that they are coming together. So there is less of a gap between the performance of the two student groups. Sometimes this can get muddy, so I wanted to kind of provide as clear cut as possible an example just for kind of going through what we're looking at. When we do talk a lot about, and we're going to mention, so I will mention here, talk a lot about acceleration of students. This is really where we're kind of talking about this. While one group may steadily move up as they have been, we need one to move faster to close that gap, because we don't want anybody to come down and do worse for that gap to close, and that defeats the purpose as well. All right, so that is that's the purpose of the goal. We're gonna look at the next set of graphs, and I'm gonna kind of leave this here, where there's a few gap groups here on top, and then we have a few at the bottom, and I think it's covered by the Zoom piece to decrease size.
Probably slide Dr. Martin up to the corner.
I think it's this somewhere. Oh.
Slide her
You
on
want
up
it-
there.
No, I think I just need to make it smaller so all the graphs.
There you go.
If you can reduce the size of the page, Ms. Tanner. They can see. So looking at the next set of graphs, we're going to talk about how they relate to this interim measure. This set of graphs illustrates the change in the total performance gap between each focus student group and their comparison group. So in this case, the dashed lines the line graphs that are solid are the gaps over time that have existed. The dashed lines are the targets that we've set for future administrations. So this is really looking at the piece to see which way have the gaps gone. If this is going down, they've gotten smaller. If they've gone up, then we're kind of going the wrong way, right? So we see here, just to point out an example, economically disadvantaged, we see where this has gone down. We're seeing a little bit of an up, but again, kind of over time, what we've kind of consistently seen is the reducing of that gap. And in the data chart, what we have is the information telling us where the proficiency was for each of the groups. Just to hold here for a second, here's English learners. And then Hispanic compared to not Hispanic. The way we compare this, the first group is Black students to white students as the student group with the comparison group. All of the others are students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, English learners, and Hispanic students, but compared to the total student population minus that set of students, to look at it that way. Additionally, we have here, there is another graph. This table is the chart of the opposite of the percentage of students who are proficient, but it's showing the students who need additional supports. Essentially, this chart really is not needed any longer, but we've left it in because it is the exact opposite of that proficiency chart that we first looked at. When we first initiated this goal, we were using STAR, and STAR had an additional performance band that would show up here. But at this point, it is the complete inverse. I'm going to go back up and leave these charts up while we talk through what the data is showing us, and I'll try to remember to move it down and up so that we can look at different things. When looking at the data from fall to winter, all the performance and gaps increased with a few exceptions. In the few exceptions where the gaps decreased, the proficiency of student groups declined, which is not the desired effect. So what we're seeing is instead of those two things going up and that gap closing, we saw one coming down to meet, which is the second kind of part of the goal as well, or also of the desired effect. Due to the additional 6 weeks of instruction and the possible impact on fall results, I don't want to put too much emphasis on the fall to winter data view. The winter to winter comparisons and long-term comparison are more pertinent in the context of understanding student performance in Norfolk Public Schools. So looking at year over year, when we're looking at winter to winter gaps, we see in a couple of the comparison that gaps have been maintained or reduced when compared to last school year at the same time of year. However, the student groups are performing lower. So again, that second piece is not what we're hitting. We're seeing groups come down to meet the other. So it's not the desired outcome for reducing performance gaps. Looking at the long-term comparison, which means we're looking at where we started this back in spring of '23 to where we are currently in winter. There is a decrease for all focus groups and their comparison group, except for students with disabilities and Hispanic students. The increased gap for the Hispanic student comparison is not really a concern in this context because the gap remains below the target. So we always wanted them to at least be within a certain, like 5 of each other, or maybe 10 of each other with that piece. If we look up here at the Hispanic group, and I might just leave it up on the chart, here, what we can see is that group is here. I want to say we were looking at the within plus or minus 10, and so we're at a 5% gap. Yes, it moved. Yes, students declined, even though the gap is smaller. It's still one of those that we are within the target of being within the long-term goal. Within the small-term target, yes, we've not hit it there either. However, let's flip the script a little bit. And I want to talk about the student groups individually, comparing this winter to last winter, instead of just the gaps in between
See,
the
my background
comparisons.
is blurred, just so you know.
Did do what?
I was like, is it?
Okay. Okay. Well, I thought she muted herself.
All right, so we're flipping the script is where I was. So yes, the student groups, we're going to look at them individually, comparing winter to winter, and not just in the view of gaps in between comparison groups. This does provide us important accompanying story, especially when looking at the school level. The school level, we're talking about all schools that were assessed were schools that had a grade 3-5, combined schools that went up to 8th grade, and traditional middle schools. Each student group improvement in proficiency rates compared to last year's winter rates. When we looked at that, the following was noted. 67% of schools improved the proficiency rate for Asian students. 42% of schools improved the proficiency rates for Black students. 50% of schools improved for Hispanic students. 39% of schools improved for white students. 47% improved for multi-race students. 29% for economically disadvantaged students. 35% improved for students with disabilities, and 53% of schools improved for English learners.
Could I ask a clarifying question real quick? We weren't provided with the winter data from the previous year, correct?
So on here, no, it's not on here on the data chart.
Okay.
But that's something on the next, we can update and submit to add all the way across versus just
Okay.
the spring.
Just wanted to make sure, because,
Yeah, it's not on, no, it's not here.
okay.
I think that was my clarifying question, what you
Okay.
were reading off. If that is, especially if it's being included in the year-over-year in the monitoring report, I think that would be helpful to
Yep,
have.
I can add that.
Yeah, okay.
That's easy. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. With that piece, with this accompanying story, what it lets us know is that student groups have improved. They just don't seem to be accelerating as quickly as their comparison groups when we look at it at that gap group. This is why we'll always say that acceleration is needed, because these two lines that we looked at earlier on the example graph will not ever meet if the lower performing student group does not accelerate. This alternate data story does not minimize the importance of performance gaps, but seeing the percentage of schools who are showing improvements winter to winter is important information and shows that the work at the schools of teachers, students, staff, and administration are moving students forward. So what's going well? We talked about proficiency rates when we're looking at them. They have over time, so where we looked left to right, generally speaking, they have been consistently improving. Even if they are small improvements, they're still improvements. This lets us know that the two instructional focuses of instruction that have been presented on multiple occasions are working, which are the Tier 1 instruction, strengthening Tier 1 instruction, as well as the layered system of supports for individual needs of students. The strategies that are going well for this interim measure are the same as reported on interim measure 3.1 and 3.2 that we presented in March, at the March 26th meeting, as well as the State of the Schools presentation in January of 26. As a reminder, a combination of efforts are always going to be needed for improving the academic achievement for any student, even in the context of student group performance, which are strengthening Tier 1 instruction and using a layered system of supports. The next steps listed at the end of this report, those really do fall into the work of strengthening Tier 1 as well as the layered system of supports. Okay, first, there's an intentional focus on strengthening the instruction of all students, which is what we call Tier 1 instruction. The most effective way to do this is through training and coaching for teachers of what instructionally is required, which is what Norfolk English Department staff have been doing. One way to monitor that has been implemented was where they implemented the instructional requirements by increasing understanding use of the VDOE walkthrough tools. Those are K-12 or K-3. We've talked about those at a couple meetings. Just those are really those pieces where we monitor what they've been working on and how that's going in the classroom. As a result, teachers are able to put into practice what they've learned in training, and the school administration, coaches, and central administration departments can monitor and support as needed. To expand further on the information about the English walkthrough tools, it ensures that teachers get a consistent feedback focused on priority instructional practices. Walkthroughs also allow coaching to be customized to school grade level and/or teacher. Regarding a timeline of walkthroughs in schools, it does really depend on the situation of the school. Some have more need than others, and the walkthrough tool actually will help align the supports to the needs. When walkthroughs are done in a school by the school administration, the feedback is generally given to the teacher by the school's administration, if the focus of the walkthrough is the teacher's performance. Sometimes the feedback from the tool is used not for direct teacher feedback, but for determining needs in our instructional programming implementation with fidelity. Secondly, for individualized supports, student supports, which are beyond Tier 1 instruction, that we find the most effective is using that layered concept. Layers are implemented differently for students based on individual needs. The layers include, but are not limited to, face-to-face remediation with reading staff member, either in small groups or individual, followed by focused tutoring with others using scripted systems or not, and additionally using online platforms for deeper skill practice. One of the main online platforms used for this purpose for reading is Lexia Learning. Lexia is a hybrid program, and although it does have the online component for continued intervention, there's also a small group and one-to-one in-person lessons that are essential to make sure the program in its entirety is effective. Lexia is an evidence-based program supported by the research done to include on the Evidence for ESSA website. This is one of the websites presented at the Federally Identified Schools and Programming presentation in February of '26. In addition, Lexia's effectiveness was analyzed by our outside research consultation group, and they found that students who participate in Lexia at a higher rate have an increased likelihood of achieving proficiency on the SOL reading test. This was found to be even more prevalent for English learners. We know this focus is working because the majority of groups at the school level are improving year after year, with some exceptions in the results from this winter. When using data formatively, it is of utmost importance to not make rash changes based on one data point, which can have the opposite effect on outcomes than intended. Nothing's been abandoned in practice in this area in the context of the timeline of this reporting because everything is evidence-based and instructionally sound. However, as instructional data are reviewed and feedback is obtained, practices are refined for the improvement of students. In the bigger picture of these practices being put into place and supporting the improvement of student achievement, sustainability of practice is key. This requires novice and veteran teachers to remain in the division, to use the training they've been given by our departments, where each consecutive year they're able to become more proficient teaching with the trained focuses and be able to move on to learning new teaching skills, which all build upon the prior year's training and practices. So what's not going well? Currently, students with disabilities and English learners have higher needs in reading based on proficiency rates and gaps. Gaps do remain largest for students with disabilities and English learners in the context of this interim measure. For English learners, though, over half of the schools have improved their reading proficiency when comparing winter '26 performance to winter '25. Students with disabilities do continue to improve slowly. Tier 1 and individualized supports discussed previously are the number one way to also support students with disabilities and English learners. However, some individualized processes have been put in place specific to the two student groups. First, I want to mention that when discussing supports for specific student groups, it is always pertinent to remember that the allotted time for strong Tier 1 instruction must always be protected. At times, students with the most needs they're tempted to be pulled from the classroom to focus on remediation of past skills not mastered or to intervene deeply. If this is done during Tier 1 instruction, students with the most needs end up missing out on the core instruction. So it's a major balancing act at the schools to be able to find those pockets of time. Schools do attempt to protect Tier 1 instructional time, but sometimes can find it difficult due to the level of needs for some students and there only being a few hours in the day. So specifically for students with disabilities and English learners, here are the few of the specific things that have been layered on top, which are more about improving the instruction that the students are accessing. So for English learners, there's been a series of trainings for teachers and school administration. The training's mostly focused on unpacking standards with an English learner lens. What that means is that this training works with teachers, not just the EL teacher, but the teacher of record that the students are going to see day after day, to review what the standard is that is going to be taught to all students, how to take it apart, to plan for the academic language English learners are going to be required to understand, navigate, and respond to throughout the instructional lessons. If teachers become proficient with this concept, this is a perfect example of how strengthening Tier 1 instruction is the first and best intervention for all students. Other trainings have been offered as well, including increasing engagement of EL students by being purposeful with academic talk, other school-specific requested trainings, and many other optional topics. There was a question that came up about the state growth assessment being the most appropriate assessment to formally assess English learners in reading comprehension. And in short, yes, it is. The other formal assessment available that English learners take is the Access for ELs. The assessment serves a completely different purpose for the students and does not assess overall reading of text and demonstrating comprehension of the read text. That's what the student growth assessment does, as well as the SOL, is looking at that comprehension piece. For students with disabilities, there also has been ongoing training that has been provided for students, for teachers and administration, mainly focused on improving specially designed instruction. So again, this is that same kind of focus for English learners. How do we get it so that what they're getting in the classroom initially is the best that they can get at that point? So this is how students with disabilities mainly focus on improving specially designed instruction. This is how students with disabilities access the general instruction, just like with EL students. If this is strengthened and teachers become proficient with this concept, students should improve. Additionally, the Department of Learning Support has recently launched a walkthrough tool for administration in schools and central departments that can be used to help them understand what they should be seeing when specially designed instruction is implemented in the classroom. So again, another walkthrough tool, but walkthrough tools are pretty powerful tools so that everybody's on the same page and teachers are getting consistent feedback with what they're also being instructed and learning how to do. In both areas, there is a continuous collaboration with the curriculum departments to ensure continuity of messaging and use of evidence-based practices and interventions for students. So with all of that, I just want to quickly say that even though it's implied that the next steps that are listed are what are in place for students to support strengthening Tier 1 instruction and those layered individual student supports, and then also some specific things that are in place for student groups, I want to address a few points in the narrative included for the mid-year updates. One thing that is not there that is very exciting is that we've been awarded for 9 of our schools the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. This grant will support funding of a designated high-quality consulting partner that'll complete classroom visits using the Virginia Literacy Walkthrough Protocols, as a common tool for observing instruction. So it's not going to, this is focusing on identifying those instructional patterns and trends in the classrooms, not for providing feedback directly to teachers. So this is really to kind of identify needs by schools and teachers, and then assisting with the findings will be used, and then guiding the division on what upcoming professional development and supports are needed for the schools, so for the teachers to continue to accelerate their understandings, which then in turn accelerates the students. And the next steps about training for improving comprehension, scaffolding, and intervention strategies to accelerate progress, there was a question that was brought up about the additional data points used to monitor. Even though the public reporting here is based on formal data, schools and central offices continue to use multiple data points to determine the needs of students, plan instruction, remediation, and interventions, provide said instruction, remediation, interventions, and then check for understanding. Those data points might include results from the growth test, but with a completely different twist. VALS results from unit tests at the standard level, reporting from Lexia Learning, classroom artifacts, and so on. So please keep in mind, even with that mention, that is just to show that we, as a division, teachers are using formative data in the schools, but it is not intended that is to be a formal share out of data from those sources. That is essentially what I have for reading, and I'm ready to take any questions at this time.
School board members, you've heard the monitor report. Are there any questions? Thank
you. Thank you, Ms. McGarity, for the thoughtful and thorough presentation of school board goal for interim measures 1 and 2. Well, 1 right now. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, looking the year over year, the winter to winter, and you talked about, you broke out for each of the gap groups. Could you, I guess for those that are not seeing progress, is there a way for you to summarize, summarize what some of the characteristics are of those that are not meeting?
And when you're saying of those, not of the student group, but of the school, is your thought?
Of this, so
individually looking at, so when I kind of wrote it off, those percentages, those are of that student group. But if we're talking about the schools, again, it's kind of the same as 3.1 when we did that. That was surprising of the schools. And there's even more when we're looking at it by different student groups. It is not our schools that are typically accredited, on track, those things. It's not that they're not, just because we have more now, but there are schools that typically we've seen pretty much a standstill, if not moving, that are moving. So some of them are higher performing schools, some of them are typically lower performing schools, some are high poverty, it's really kind of a mixed bag of what the schools are, just because we're getting bigger. When it's the 35% of schools for students with disabilities, it was a lot of our lower performing schools that was. Again, there are others mixed in there. High poverty, it's not necessarily, there's some with high long-term subs, some with not. But again, that's kind of what's helping us lean into strengthening this tier 1 instruction, like all of those pieces that the English department has put in place, in which we kind of see the same thing in math that we'll talk about.
Okay.
To kind of keep pushing forward with those pieces.
Okay.
Because if there are long-term subs, then there's some kind of, and again, it's that piece of having to just spend time to look like, well, is it that curriculum and instruction is there more? And we kind of looked at that, and they're like, not really. Like, it's not super clear what it is, other than everybody's getting this, whether they're long-term sub, the training, the coaching, all those pieces. And some schools are just being creative, that we just know anecdotally of how they're maybe getting the tier 1 instruction in. It might be, if there's a lot of long-term subs, it's going to be the reading specialist or somebody else. It might not be the reading specialist that is certified and well-versed on the delivering tier 1. They're doing that. So those are some anecdotal things. But interestingly,
All
to
right,
give you a pinpoint and say, it is exactly this, it's exactly Lexia, it's exactly that, it's a mixed bag across
sure.
what's going on.
Right, and I guess as we delve into it, or as you all delve into it, to kind of get a better understanding of what it is, because, in some cases, it could be leadership, it could be mentorship, it could be, a variety of things, and, as we've seen over, not just our district, but districts in general, even some of those that come off as high-performing, their gap groups can still be big, which
Right.
tells us something
Correct.
else perhaps.
Right.
So having a good understanding of what that is, I think would help us.
Right, and we do, and that's why we kind of pull it out separately. It's like our groups kind of moving together,
Right,
but not closing, right? So if we're seeing just kind of everything moving together, it's like, okay, got tier one maybe in, but it's like, what are those other pieces that support, like that with the EL? Working on that academic language piece during the actual tier one lesson, weeding all of that in then helps everybody start coming together.
okay.
So those are kind of, it's not that it's just left to the wind, but,
Yeah.
getting more clarity on that, yes, but it's also that whole thing, like we're in those last few stretches, stopping people to do all of that right now is also
Yes.
tough.
Yes, and so speaking of that, so when we were looking at, you were walking us through the graphs and where we are what our actual data shows to where our targets show, and obviously, we're not where we want to be as far as hitting those targets. How are we, I guess I want to understand how we're cascading our expectations down to, at the school level, in terms of hitting those spring targets. So obviously, there has to be some serious acceleration in order to
Right,
hit those
and a lot of
targets.
schools are putting programs in place right now, and not, I say right now, but it's kind of been coming that they've been planning for these to really get down to what are the things students need, bigger picture, so that, it's not that, okay, we didn't make it, but now there's less of an expectation. That expectation is still there to really kind of push through to the end, to really double down. And there's still a lot of instruction still to go. So that's the piece of it too, is that, remember we talked about, when we first started talking about this has pieces of it that have not been taught yet. So they're able to even use this as a way to say, as a pre-assessment, it's, the lovely thing about this growth assessment is we can use it in so many different ways for different audiences and that kind of thing. So, there's still instruction to go, and then there's time that they also practice, so.
And so,
Christine, let me go around and make sure. Is there anyone else who has a question?
Not at this point.
Well, I have one.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then I'll go back to you. So what I'm hearing is, so schools are making some finish strong plans to address these issues. Are we, as a school division, I'm sure we are, but making sure that schools have what they need, specific needs to their schools to finish strong?
Yes, I mean, one of the pieces with the planning is even when the upper, and again, if somebody wants to jump in, but upper administration or the support staff are going in for the data meetings that we talked about, the accountability support meetings, called them a couple things over the past couple years. The idea is, what do you need? So this data is talked about, so remember, we took this growth assessment back in January, and the first thing that happens is we don't look at putting it together for this, we look at putting it together for the school. So they are able to kind of quickly turn over and say, what do we need to do? So when they do have those meetings where they have a kind of a captive audience to say, what do we need? And and that turns around if it is something that's reasonable.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on that in terms of, you talked about the additional data sources that are being used in the school, and I appreciate you addressing what those are. But specifically, is the administration also looking at how they correlate with the SGA? And I guess that also gets back to the second part, which is what strategies work well and don't work well, and so if you could.
With the whole idea of, have we done a statistical analysis of the two things? No.
Okay.
So, but taking unit assessments, for example, those really are the unit assessments that would have been given when we were all in school on Fridays where you took your test about what you were taught, right? What's happened is we've just done it, not we, me, but curriculum, Bruce's team, they have made those with teacher input and everything at the division level to ensure that they are always aligned to what's being assessed at the end of the year, at that level of rigor. So the taught, tested curriculum are matching and aligned. So that piece of it, the correlation of it, no, because they are more formative, real-time data sources, where they're looking at it, these 4 standards were taught, these 4 were assessed, and then they go directly from that into planning mode to say, really at that standard level. So it's not even so there is work around alignment of rigor and of what is being assessed and aligned with what is taught, which again walk through to all those, that kind of, it's a big bubble of things that work together. But doing a study to say, is this, because it's not really, I don't want to say it's not used as a measure for predicting outcomes at the end of the year. It is more used to turn around and do work with students automatically, which just have a different purpose.
And one final question. So, when in our previous monitoring of these goals, we heard a lot about MTSS as a strategy, and I'm kind of tying this into what we're going to talk about later with this, what we heard a little bit about in the special ed plan, for instance. What role, how are we monitoring implementation of MTSS with Fidelity and all of that as a strategy towards improving?
So the MTSS part, I will tell you, I would have to look further into that to find out how that is monitored. I'm not part of that team, and it's just not something I have. I'm not saying we.
Poll is coming.
But Dr. Pohl is going to come up right now and answer.
Okay.
I can speak to
'Cause he
that
can.
briefly. So we have a division leadership team for MTSS, and they take reports from schools on their monthly meetings that happen as well, or more frequent meetings at the school based off of the supports that they're offering. And then those are also a part of the discussion in our data meetings that we have at our school level to make sure that MTSS is being promulgated down. And that's also when we talked about Summer Leadership Institute coming up for this summer, is the focus on MTSS and how all the supports that we have in place now and making sure those are all being integrated with Fidelity across the division.
Dr. Pohl, can you share what MTSS means for those that?
Multi-tiered systems of support.
Thank you.
Good call on the acronym. Thank you for that.
Pretty good if I missed one.
Good. Well, I think we're good with this first monitoring report. We can go on to mathematics. Ms. McGarrett.
All right, so all right, so 4.2, I'm going to come down directly to the table, just because we're going to sit here for most of it. All right, so we're going to move on to 4.2, which is very similar to 4.1 in the layout and the way we talk about it and things like that. It is still focuses on closing achievement gaps, but what we talked about before was in reading. This is now in math. I'm going to review the initial information. I'm not going to review the initial information about the measures I did in reading, since it's all the same when we're talking about what the state growth assessment is, how it works, how it's laid out, those kinds of things. One piece of additional information that we talked about with reading in prior meetings is that math, the assessment itself is not different, but what has changed is that last year, beginning spring, there was a new set of standards that were to be implemented actually last school year, and they were assessed beginning this past spring. Typically, we're given a crosswalk year for implementation of the standards, and then we go into, which really allows for resources to become aligned and things like that. But that is one piece that is different. The standards are different beginning this past spring. We're going to look at the table for math and do a quick review of what's included. We're not, as I said, we're not spending as much time as we did about navigating the information, but we'll talk about the data. So looking at the table of the student group achievement over time, so again, that long-term view, and the associated gaps for a long-term view, we're going to look left to right at the Black student group. We see that math proficiency has continuously improved from spring 23 to fall 25. The winter administration is a decline from fall, but continues to be higher than the spring 25 results for the Black student group. We also see the gaps between focus groups and their comparison groups mostly get smaller until this administration. If a group declined early on in the historical view, typically there was a rebound in the following administration. Providing another example, though, of just what we're talking about when we're from the math perspective for reducing performance gaps, we're going to focus on focus group of students with disabilities compared to the comparison group, which is students without disabilities. In the dark highlighted column, which is that same exact place we talked about with reading here, with the dark highlighted column, what that is showing us that it is the targets that we were hoping to hit, working towards hitting, not just hoping, for each group, and then the target gap. The column next to that, where it says actual in the header, is the column of the actual student outcomes. We see that 28.3 of students with disabilities were proficient on the math winter growth test, and 59.4 were proficient in the comparison group of students without disabilities. The gap between the performance of the two student groups is 31.1 percentage points. We can also see here that we didn't meet our target based on the red text, and that there is an increase when compared to fall outcomes. So we're going to move to the example graph. This is not students with disabilities, but this is same as it was for reading. Math data, but same concept. We're looking for this, what we're looking at for this measure. So what does that really look like when it's illustrated out? This graph is the same concept as we looked at with reading. It's showing the proficiency rates of Black students compared to the proficiency rate of white students in math. On the right side of the graph, we can see that there's a 30.4 performance gap. So again, the two different proficiency levels, and then that's that gap in between. What we ultimately want, both groups to go up, but for them to also merge so that, or be as close as possible, so that proficiency is in the same place for both student groups. I'm going to move down to also the page of graphs here. Same concept as reading. The solid line graph is how big the gap was for each of those administrations, and then we have what the targets are for future administrations. I'm going to leave this here while we're talking through, but there is also a data table that is that invert the opposite of for the needs supports. Just like discussed in reading, the fall to winter comparisons for the school year should not have we're not putting too much emphasis on that based on the additional 6 weeks of instruction at the beginning of the school year. However, to summarize, the performance gaps increased for the majority of groups in the comparison, and the one group, the Hispanic student group, that did not increase, the gaps did drop in proficiency. The student groups did drop in proficiency, which again is not the desired outcome. So we're seeing that piece, just because a gap closed doesn't mean it's a yay. When we're looking year over year, and this is, I will submit for math as well, with the winter rates, we see the same year over year comparison pattern in math as we did in reading, which is that the student groups are mostly performing lower than the prior winter with wider performance gaps. However, we saw English learners and Hispanic students focus groups maintain the gap between their comparison group when compared to winter of last year. So they didn't close the gap, they didn't go down, but they're maintaining that group, that same gap. However, the same thing here, they are lower. We want them to, that's not the other piece of it that we want to see. If we're looking at that long-term comparison, the gaps between all focus groups and their comparison groups are smaller, except for the students with disabilities when compared to students without disabilities. So we're going to flip that script again and for a moment talk about an accompanying math story of how those groups look independently of comparison groups for math proficiency when we're talking winter to winter. When we looked at that, again, same set of schools, that for math, these are actually higher percentages than reading in most places. 67% of schools improved the proficiency rate for Asian students, 65% improved the proficiency rates for Black students, 59% of schools improved for Hispanic students, 58% of schools improved for white students, 62% improved for multi-race students, 59% improved for economically disadvantaged students, 50% of schools improved for students with disabilities, and 56% of schools improved for English learners. As stated with the reading data, this accompanying story in math lets us know that student groups are improving. However, it continues to remind us about the acceleration that's needed. This doesn't minimize the purpose of the specific gap view, but this data does give us insight to instructional programming just as much as looking at it from the gap perspective. So if we're talking about what's going well, I'm going to put this back up here. So what's going well in math? The response here is very similar to reading, where we are seeing improvement in proficiency rates until this winter administration. We know in the area of math, the same two instructional focuses remain the most appropriate to improve student achievement. Those focuses are, while a combination of efforts will always be needed for improving the academic achievement for students, the two areas are strengthening Tier 1 instruction and a layered system of individual supports to meet student needs. In the area of math, there is also a walkthrough tool that has been developed, trained on, coached, and being used for walkthroughs in classrooms to ensure that instruction focuses are being implemented with fidelity. Then also giving us feedback, and I say us as a division, not us as Kristen, trained on to what we need to work on with teachers. The walkthrough, it does ensure that evidence-based practices which support the achievement of students are being implemented with fidelity in the classroom. Training and coaching are provided for teachers and administration to be able to understand and effectively use the mathematics walkthrough tools. Like in reading, this tool ensures that there is consistency of monitoring and feedback for teachers, as well as schools and central mathematics department staff being able to use the information to determine what a school's needs are. In the area of math, the layers for individual student supports include, but are not limited to, face-to-face remediation with a math staff member, either in small groups or individual, followed by focused tutoring with others using scripted systems or not, and additionally using online platforms for deeper skill practice. One of the main platforms is Zern, that is used in mathematics for students to practice the math skills that they need. Zern's an evidence-based program supported by the research done to include Zern on the Evidence for ESSA website. This is one of the websites, again, that we discussed at the federally identified schools and programming presentation in February that we use, but we are required to use that in the What Works Clearinghouse from VDOE. In addition, Zern's effectiveness was analyzed by our outside research consultation group, and they found that students who participate in Zern at a high level increase their likelihood of being proficient on the math SOL test, as well as an additional analysis provided by the vendor came out with the same results. We know this focus is working because the majority of groups at the school level are improving year after year, with some exceptions. When using data formatively, it is of utmost importance not to make major rash changes based on one data point, which we can have the opposite effect. Also in the area of math, nothing has been abandoned in practice in the context of the timeline of this reporting because everything is evidence-based and instructionally sound. However, as instructional data are reviewed and feedback is obtained, same thing as in reading, we refine the practices that are being implemented so that we see for student improvement. Also in the bigger picture with math, the big piece of it is the practices being put into place and supporting the improvement of student achievement. Sustainability, once again, is key. This requires, it's where we just need our teachers to stay that have been trained to continue with that series of training that improves their efficacy in the classroom. What's not going well? The comparison of focus groups of Black students and students with disabilities shows they have the largest gaps over time. But the gap for the focus group of Black students proficiency has steadily improved. So if we ignore this past fall and the performance gap when compared with their comparison group, the gap steadily reduced. Students have actually improved, skipping fall because we have that question around fall of the additional 6 weeks of instruction. Tier 1 and individualized supports discussed previously continue to be the #1 way to also support all students, including students with disabilities. However, some individualized processes have been put into place, and these processes really are the same for math that they were for reading, where it is the walkthrough tools, so that they're the training, coaching, and then the implementation of the walkthrough tool that for them to, for not just learning support, but also the school administration, to be able to monitor implementation of good specially designed instruction. So even though it's implied that the next steps are what are in place to support Tier 1 instruction, layered individual student supports, and specific things in place for specific student groups, there are a few additional items to share about math as well. In addition, a next step that is not there, because it was not able to be there when we posted this, is that Norfolk Public Schools was granted 2 grants from the Virginia Department of Education, and they are the Virginia Department of Education's Mathematics Innovation Grant and the Virginia Department of Education's Acceleration Grant for Math. So again, that's where the state is seeing the need for that acceleration. We've been awarded this grant. And what especially the innovation grant supports the mathematics office with strengthening Tier 1 mathematics instruction by enhancing the implementation of our adopted high-quality instructional materials, planned activities including partnering with an approved consultant to develop and implement strategic high-quality instructional materials support, and targeted professional learning and coaching. The Mathematics Acceleration Grant allows for the mathematics office to develop and provide micro-credentials targeted to support selected elementary teachers' mathematical, conceptual understanding, and expand their use of evidence-based instructional practices for teaching grade-level and advanced concepts. For secondary mathematics, the grant will increase the number of middle school teachers endorsed in Algebra 1 and Geometry. So doubling down on the advanced math coursework as much as we can. I do want to, I'll mention quickly, one of the questions that has come up is like, we keep talking about these evidence-based practices and those kinds of things. Basically, what those are not a thing that you buy. It is really an idea of practices that have been vetted by researchers to say there is evidence to back up that if this is taught this way in the classroom, students will improve. So, it's one of those that I have two. I've got a giant reading one that's for one grade level, and there's also, I have one for math here. Typically, we don't print them because they're so big, but it's where you can see everything was done for these evidence-based practices on both areas. Were selected, schools can't just go randomly pick. I mean, if they pick one that's strong, they're still going to be in the area where there's strong evidence, but our curriculum department, the content areas, vetted them as well to say, okay, how does this fit into what we're doing with those practices so that nobody was going rogue. So they might have a pile to pick from, but they've been vetted by the researchers to say there is strong evidence, as well as our department to say these are the ones we're putting in place. So when training and coaching, we keep talking about that, it is all based on these practices that should be in place at our schools for our students. And they all actually purposefully, one of the things the division was looking for to make sure to vet, to say yay or nay, was also, was it studied on students with disabilities? Was it looked at with English learners? Was it, and that kind of thing. So I know I'm not telling you a thing, because I think that's what we want to hear is a thing to kind of put behind, but these are the things that are that Title I piece and that layered system of interventions that are all evidence-based, that are really putting in practice. And over time, we are seeing the little incremental moves in both areas, which hopefully will turn, will look bigger when we look back further. So I just wanted to address that because I know that question came and didn't fit exactly into the script, so.
Well, school board members, you've heard the presentation. Are there any questions?
I have a quick comment.
Yes,
If
Dr.
that's
Rose,
okay.
and then Ms. Passine.
This is an obvious statement, and this has zero contradiction to anything that was presented in terms of data and efforts. But if we look to the chart as it relates to the gap in reading, as well as in math, while there are differences, there's more similarities than differences, right? Doesn't take too much analysis for that. So let's keep that in mind. The other in reading, in 2003 and 2004, we see a gap of about approximately 23 points. In 2005, 2026, 23 points. Currently, we're at 27 points. Well, then if we look at math, we, in the fall of 2025, 26, 27 points, and currently we're sitting at 30. Bottom line is this. Knowing that 55% of our students are Black in Norfolk, right? So these numbers are far from what they need to be for us to become the high-achieving district that our students deserve us to be. So this is not a contradiction of any sort of efforts, et cetera, but as we look forward to our future plan and goals as it relates to students, incremental gains are really, really important, and so are our expectations.
Yes.
And so I think that as we move forward, as we engage the community in the future plan, knowing this is not all on schools, this is on a lot of entities within the community, we want to keep our finger and our pulse on this gap and someday never see 30-point gap, right, between the majority of our students and the rest. So I think that one thing we can probably all agree around the table is on that. And so while I think we do need to talk about what we're doing to constantly focus on incremental improvements, the time will come for us to also engage in what will we determine as the only acceptable gap in the future. So I just wanted to bring that forward and probably state the obvious, and that is not contradicting anything that's been presented, because I think everything we've talked about is factual.
That well said.
And I will say we come from the side of factual with these. So, I mean, I can give you lots of opinions around things, but that's kind of not my, you know what I mean? It's one of those that this is factually what's happening.
Right.
And where, where we are and that kind of thing. So I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Rose.
Question?
Absolutely, and I appreciate that comment and observation with our data, and couldn't agree more with that. Can you speak a little bit about, you mentioned the 2 grants that we've
For math.
received for math. Can you talk a little more about how, with the eligibility criteria, like generally, and what the amounts are and what it's enabling?
I will
us
tell you
to
that is part, I would have to find out and can
Okay.
add that part back for you. They just got them February, I want to say, like it
Okay.
just came through. They had applied a while ago. I remember supplying lots of data for it.
Okay.
For them to kind of look at, and it's these kinds of things they were looking at that we need support, additional supports fiscally as well as,
Okay.
like with the
So we
consulting
applied-
kind of thing.
We applied for them.
That is
wasn't
my
like the kind
understanding,
Where it was
yes.
like, we are telling you this.
No, it is not a, for lack of nobody wanting
Yeah,
to
I was
ever
like, I
hear
don't know
these
what the right word
letters
is.
again, but for, like, the comprehensive support and improvement things, it is not the state saying to us, you need this because of X. It is us knowing. So
Okay.
that's kind of that point too with making that, there's a lot of formative work that is way further into this data that, where they were able to, math and English both, were able to take it and apply for these pieces. And I'm not positive with math, but I know English is our for specific schools, so they were even able to pull data specifically for those schools to say, these schools need it first and foremost kind of thing.
Okay, and about how many schools are we talking about?
9 for the English grant.
Right.
Math, I'm not sure if it is it's school-based or if it is bigger, the division, and then they do as needed. The money's not dispersed to the school, but it is for the work at the school.
Okay, and so for math, it hasn't been targeted towards specific schools?
Not that I know, but does not mean it's not. Like, I will say that would be something I'd need to double back and ask, and probably should have, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I really want to say, like, I appreciate you trying to address all the questions and incorporate that into your presentation. Really, it does make a difference, in our understanding. You talked about ZERN and, the impact that has. What about Edmentum? And I'm
So-
sorry if you did.
No, and I didn't mention Edmentum, not for any reason other than I just didn't I kind of picked one for each area to talk about. Edmentum is in play as well. Some schools do both, some schools do one, ZERN or Edmentum. Our research consultant also included Edmentum with that and did find that the likelihood even went up for math if they were doing both. However, we have a limited time of day, that's where all of that balancing starts to get tough for schools, that getting all of it in.
Yes.
Because kids were spending more time doing that, because that is more of an intervention program than it is the core instruction, right? Like,
Right.
if you didn't get the core instruction, you still don't know, like, you don't,
Yeah.
it's that balance, and so, but they did find if they did spend time on both, that for math, the likelihood went up even more for proficiency in math. Oh, yeah, you can
Sorry.
do.
And, Ms. Pacino, a popular question is, how are we reviewing what we're using? And based off some of the results, Zern had stronger results than Edmentum. There's no need for a division to have two software packages, so we're actually sunsetting the Edmentum software package for mathematics next year.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was, I could appreciate, yeah, you could throw a million strategies and using them all together.
Looking at the best ones.
Yeah, but, okay, so I appreciate that. And I will,
I had a question. You said something about the empirical research was helping to determine what, I guess, interventions were beneficial across
So,
all students?
okay, so not what interventions, but like basically what happens is that there is a set of practices. So it might be tier one practices, the way tier one is delivered, reading, math. It might be interventions. So like Zern and Lexia are both evidence-based practices that Zern has a stronger evidence base and Lexia is moderate, but it's not saying put this in place specifically for this child with this profile. When they do the evidence-based, they basically take, research is out there to say this should work. They look for evidence. This is totally bringing it down the way I'm explaining it, but then also what we can see when we look at it, and that's one of the things curriculum is looking at it, did they look for evidence and have evidence for the effectiveness on students with disabilities, on English learners, for Black students, for poverty, students who were living in poverty, all the different, and some do, some don't, and so they really had to kind of weed through it, so different. But when they looked for that to say, these all are things that we think that will work, are evidence-backed, in both areas, then the schools could say, okay, I am a school of high poverty. I really need to kind of lean into the one. And I keep saying we, but not me.
Right.
The people doing the work, they actually will help them lean into that you're a school of high poverty. Let's look at these first to see if they are the most appropriate evidence-based strategies.
So does that mean different schools are using different strategies and there's not just one?
Yes, but they are all to the same end.
Okay.
So it's because it's I know, Dr. Foley, I don't know if you
No,
want
I
to help
get
me. It's just essentially that it is to the same end, and it might be one's systematic instruction of math, and it is, this school's actually struggling in word problems. So there are some that are just even that deep to say, when we get to those units, that's how we're going to implement these kinds of things.
So it's a more specific.
But there is a bucket that we say, these are what you need to look at, because they've been vetted by what works, ESSA for, evidence for ESSA, and then by the division as well, and then the schools pick from there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Christine, did you say you had an additional question?
no, that's,
Dr. Martin, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, but I am having trouble hearing everyone, so, and I have my volume all the way up, so if you could just speak into the microphone, that'd help. Thanks.
It might be my voice is half gone anyways.
Okay.
So it might be better for the next, with
Nope.
the next person.
Note taken and go back on mute. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, we're going to move down to 2.02, textbook adoption. Dr. Rose.
All right, I'll invite Mr. Brady to the microphone.
All right, good afternoon. Chair Moore Buffalo, Vice Chair DeCalagero, members of the board, Dr. Rose. I'm joined today by Miss Julie Flores, over here to my right, all right, with whom you are all very familiar with, our wonderful, wonderful senior coordinator of ESL. And today we'll be presenting to the board the textbooks recommended for board adoption for our English as a second language. The Virginia Department of Education does not provide recommendations for ESL textbooks. And so for textbooks that are not reviewed by the state board, a local textbook review process is conducted that includes components of what a state level review also includes. Right? Our ESL coordinator, our ESL teacher specialist, our ESL teachers, played the primary role in the textbook vetting process for our ESL textbooks. Also serving on the committee were special education teachers and also representatives from our gifted office. Committee members had the opportunity to evaluate the textbooks and also meet with the publishers to learn about the features of the various textbooks that were under consideration. The school division used the NPS website, social media platform, robocalls to inform the public of the opportunity to provide feedback about the books under consideration. The textbooks under consideration for adoption were publicly displayed for feedback at the Baron Black Branch Library, which was selected for its central location in the city and also its proximity to larger concentrations of ELS families. We absolutely value and listen to our ESL families to better understand student needs, their culture, and how we can support learning at home. However, we relied heavily on the knowledge and experience of our ESL office and our ESL teachers to help guide these recommendations because of their expertise in second language acquisition, ESL instructional design, and standards alignment. So today we are recommending for adoption the ESL books that you'll see listed on the next several slides. These textbooks were vetted to ensure they provide the highest quality instructional materials, right? You're familiar with HQIM, for our ESL students. And as a demonstration of their quality, Ms. Flores shared with me that the two series that we're recommending received the WIDA Prime Seal, which is the highest endorsement a series can receive because of the high quality of the material and the alignment to the WIDA standard. So you see on this slide that is showing, as well as what I have here in my hand, is the textbook recommended for our English ESL newcomer program. Language Launch, volumes 1 and 2 by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Publishing. So the newcomer program is designed to support students who are new to the United States or just beginning to learn English. Students practice reading, writing, speaking, and listening while learning the words and language they need to understand their classes and to communicate. This series is like a English survival course where they're learning the English to get by on a daily basis, to be able to interact, have some communication. So this is for our newcomer program. This slide lists the textbooks recommended for English language development, English 3D, which I have here in my hand, also from HMH. Right? English 3D supports English learners at all levels, right? Not just the newcomers. While newcomer programs focus on basic, everyday English, this program helps students continue building their language skills over time. Students practice speaking and writing every day, developing their vocabulary, their sentence structure, and their grammar, and use English in both the classroom and in real life situations. We have an early estimate of the cost of the ESL textbooks. We're still in the process of working with the publisher to calculate the final pricing, with funding coming from the division's existing textbook funds. That price is a 7-year price, and you'll notice that these are paperback, so these are consumable, and so the students can write in them, circle, they can annotate, mark them all up, and we get a whole new batch the following year for the. So these books that have been recommended are available for you to look at in the conference room right next door. Both versions, the different grade levels are there. So this concludes our presentation this afternoon, and Ms. Flores and I are prepared to answer any questions there.
Okay, school board members, you've heard the presentation. Ms. DiCalogero, you have a question?
Yes, I got a chance to look at the books this afternoon. Are you using any of the digital tools that are available for the books, or are you just going to use the hardback? It looks like for the 3D courses, there's a book with readings and a workbook that goes along with those.
Yeah, there are different resources, and I'll let Ms. Flores explain.
So are you planning to use any digital resources in
Yes,
this?
ma'am, yeah. So the textbook adoption that the publishing company and the quotes that they've provided is for both printed consumables and also student digital licenses for the whole 7 years of adoption. So we'll be utilizing both components, and it has unit assessments that we can access, pre and post assessments, digital ways that they can type and compose written responses, do speaking practice, so there's absolutely a digital component included as well. Yes, and also for part of their digital licensure is a parent engagement component. So for the conclusion of each unit, comes with parent letters that are multilingual, so in 10 different languages, that kind of provides like a little summary to parents of what has your student learned at the conclusion of this unit that we can send home so that they're informed about what they're learning in their English language acquisition as well.
Ms. Slaughter?
Yes, I'm glad to hear that. That goes along with my question. Do we have any ESL classes or groups for parents?
We do. So we offer adult language acquisition courses at Granby High School as part of the Granby Evening School.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. DiCalogero?
Well, and just goes to me not having knowledge. In the lower grades, do the students get pulled out for ESL instruction?
That depends. So we do have 3 different LEAP models, or language instructional educational programs. We have a newcomer model, which, as Mr. Brady described, is for our newly arrived students or with very beginning stages of English. We also have English language development, which touches on all the ranges because they will progress in WIDA. We range from level 1 to level 6. To exit our program, you have to reach a 4.4. So we touch on all those levels. And then we also have content integrated ESL, which is where we are teaching the same content standards, the same Virginia SOLs that are pertaining to that grade level, but we're infusing our what are the language demands of this content objective that we need to reinforce. And so we do that in many ways. In the elementary level, sometimes you'll hear terms like push in or pull out. So we can join a classroom teacher and co-teach with them and provide those language supports in the Tier 1 instruction. Or we can pull students out in a smaller group, also providing the same Tier 1 instruction, just delivered by the ESL teacher with those language support lens. So we'll do 2 things. As we get to the secondary level, middle school and high school, we do offer some standalone ESL courses that are by level, they count as a world language credit, because truly our English learners, instead of our native English students learning French or Spanish or Latin, our English learners are acquiring English as their second language. So the Virginia Department of Ed awards them a world language credit towards their diploma
wow,
for that,
that's awesome.
which is fantastic. And so they can take a course according to their proficiency level and move through that sequence. So a newcomer will start in our level 1 course and progress the next year, ideally in level 2, 3, 4. And if they can take 3 in a series, that awards them enough world language credit for their advanced studies diploma, which is really
wow.
fantastic. So we have that available at the middle school and the high school level. And in places where we don't necessarily have a course model, similar to elementary, the ESL teachers, they can co-teach alongside a content teacher. So maybe they're co-teaching grade 7 science together with the science teacher, or they can pull them out in a small group. And whenever we do pull students out of a classroom to do English language development or content integrated ESL, we always try to align it. So if I'm trying to pull you out for a service, if I'm pulling you out of math, which usually we avoid, but because we can teach the language of math is a real thing. But if I'm pulling you out of civics and economics, I'm going to try to infuse as much as that content again with the language demands as possible.
So does this result in students actually having more, I guess in the lower grades, do they do most of their ESL work in school, or do they end up having to take that home and resulting in more work that's done outside of the school?
Yeah, all of their ESL instruction is done within the instructional day. So we don't assign any ESL homework for them, particularly at the elementary level. So everything we accomplish is within the school day. And to Ms. McGarrity's point, it becomes interesting to try to juggle it all and fit it all in the day. But we're really blessed and fortunate to have increased our staffing. So there's even more opportunities for that co-taught instruction, that content integrated ESL. So we really do our best to make sure that we have as much alignment with their Tier 1 instruction as possible. So we're not increasing that gap of academic knowledge. We're working to close it all the time. Yeah, of course.
Ms. Basine?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and for incorporating questions and into the discussion. My question is around, so there's access, but how well are we doing outreach with our families to access these opportunities? Like what was the engagement and outreach like for, around the textbooks and also around, the ESL courses for adults and, the world language credit, like that pathway, like what kind of outreach is in place?
Absolutely, that's a good question. Let me try to address all the parts of it. So for me, as the EL coordinator, I'm responsible for the K through 12 programming, but that does not mean that we don't have a collaboration with our adult ed program. So this textbook series is only intended for use with our K through 12 students. Our adult English language acquisition courses do have their own textbook series that they've adopted for that purpose, and they've been written and designed for adult learners. So there is a distinction there. For this textbook adoption, we have made the resources public to all families to review. I will say ESL is a bit unique because this series is delivered in English. Our ESL programming, we don't have a bilingual dual language immersion model here in Norfolk, so the instruction is delivered to the students in English. So if you as a parent are not a native English speaker, you might have difficulty reviewing this textbook series. So we really leaned into the myself, my specialists, our teachers, and those of us who are trained in second language acquisition to do more of the vetting of this product. But we are grateful that it has a parent engagement component that is multilingual, as I mentioned earlier. And for more aspects of parent engagement, while the adult ed program is separate, of course, the students we serve, their parents will often ask myself, our family engagement team, our ESL teachers, where they can take English courses. So we will, from the K-12 side, we will advertise and promote the adult evening classes. and send flyers and notifications to them about when enrollment is open. Even when that's full, we'll connect them. ODU has their English Learning Center that some of our families can go. I know even our surrounding school divisions that offer adult evening classes. If you're not a resident of that city, it's just a smaller nominal fee. Like if you're a resident, it might be $50 to take the adult class versus $100 if you're not a resident of the city. So we try to connect them to a wealth of resources for them. Also, our ESL Family Engagement Team, we offer workshops that we have at the International Welcome Center for our families. And we have some that are focused specifically on our high school students and really getting the parents to understand the difference between the standard diploma, the advanced studies diploma, how those ESL classes count towards their world language credit, how many credits they need to graduate. So we have ongoing work with our families on a number of topics that pertain to school and how they can partner with us and with their students towards that goal of on-time graduation for, beginning in kindergarten all the way through. So we really work hard to do that. And again, with needs assessments and determining, which specific schools or what topics the families need. Do a great job with exit surveys and kind of pulse checking with them of what do you need more information about. I hope that addressed all the parts.
Yes.
Please let me know if I missed something.
Yes, no,
Okay.
you touched on everything, I think, so, thank you.
You have a question, Ms. Thomas?
Yeah. Do we have ESL teacher in each school?
Yes, ma'am, we do. So the ESL teacher is prescribed based on the proficiency levels of the students at that school. So the Virginia Department of Ed has a standard of quality. It used to be purely based on this number of students to this number of teachers. But recently, in the past 2 years, VDOE has changed it to be levels. So the lower level proficiency you are, the smaller group size it should be with your teacher. And then as you progress in your proficiency, that group size will change. So I, as the coordinator, will do like a large calculation of how many EL students are in this school, what is their level, what's the required staffing for that, and then place ESL teachers accordingly. Many of our schools have a full-time ESL teacher there all day, every day, or even a team of teachers there because of this number of students and their proficiency. I can even think Norview High School, for example, has 5 ESL teachers there full-time all day, every day. Little Creek Elementary is another large school with 5. Larry Moore has 3 full-time. Ocean Air has 3 full-time. Tanners Creek. So a number of schools have a team of ESL teachers, which is fantastic. But every school has an ESL teacher assigned. Even our smallest schools, like our Chesterfield Academy that only has 3 English learners, they still have an ESL teacher assigned to them who may not be there all day, every day, but is there multiple times a week to service.
And you said that they may not be there every day, all day. How can we see, you said they're assigned, how can we see that they are actually there? Do you have any documentation stating we have one of those teachers in each school?
Yes.
Yeah, they have to sign in and out. If they're assigned to a school, then they sign in as any other teacher, teaching in that school does. Ones that travel between schools, sign in and sign out.
So we don't have one in each school 5 days a week? Because you said someone may use different schools. So we don't have one in each school?
Depends on, I'm understanding it depends on.
We do have one at
Level,
every
yeah,
school,
needs.
Not
but the
full-time.
frequency
Not
of
full-time.
their service depends on
But
how
we
many
have kids
students
in
are there
school
and their
full-time.
demands. Yes.
But we don't have a teacher in the school full-time?
That varies by school. So, and as far as example of Norview High School, right, there are 5 there.
Yes.
And how many of them are full-time?
All 5.
All 5 are full-time, right? And then there could be ESL teachers in a school for part of a week, because there may be, as she said, 3 students. So they get the appropriate amount of support at that school based on the number, and probably based on their level.
Right.
Right. She mentioned the change in the ratio. Ratio used to be, 1 teacher per 50 ESL students. Now it can be as low as one ESL teacher per.
Per
10
20.
Per 20, depending on the level of the proficiency of the child. So I would think having a teacher at a school with 3 ESL students, we're not utilizing that. If that ESL teacher was assigned to that school 5 days a week, we wouldn't be utilizing that ESL teacher to the fullest. So that ESL teacher visits that school, provides the services that those students need, but uses other days of the week to visit.
Dr. Rose?
So one point of clarity, and I think I'm hearing this right. So a school that maybe has 3 ESL students in it, those students are going to receive the same amount of time with an ESL teacher as a student that may have 3 full-time teachers that are there. The same number of minutes throughout the week, just we're focused on numbers,
Yes.
correct?
That is correct. So ESL teachers, they will be given their assignment based on the number of students in the building and what their level is. They submit their schedules to our ESL office to be reviewed. Part of their creation of their service schedule, they adhere to our guidance, which is what is their level, how many minutes of service a week should they be receiving. And even this year, we had the Virginia Department of Ed came and did our Title III federal program audit, where they took a very deep look at all of our schedules and to look for equity across the division. Because even if you're a school with 3 students, if you're a level 2, we want you to receive the same amount of minutes of service as a school that has 150 students and they're a level 2. So we really work hard to ensure that equity across the division, that they're getting the same amount of service and minutes, and that it's effective instruction. So it would not be effective utilization of staff to have someone there all day, every day, if there's only 3 students. But please know that we are ensuring that they receive a equitable amount of instructional time from that teacher who is shared between buildings.
Chair Buffalo.
Dr. Martin
Martin's
has
trying
a
to reach-
question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Martin?
My question is a budget question. Since we're talking about the adoption of the textbooks, Mr. Brady, you had said that the ESL books will be purchased. It's about what, 2.4 million? Yeah.
Yes,
Books over an estimated, let's see,
7 years?
7-year estimated cost. So can you help me understand how this breaks down as a 7-year estimated cost? So can you please speak to that?
Yeah, so we'll sign most likely a 7-year
Can't
contract.
hear you. Can you speak
Yeah,
in the
talk-
mic?
I'm having trouble hearing you also,
We'll-
yeah.
Purchasing will be involved in the contract work. And they will establish a 7-year contract with HMH. And the cost over the life of those 7 years is coming to about 2.4 million. So HMH.
Okay, I understand that. I guess what I want to know is, are we going to be purchasing new books each year, or are we purchasing all the books at one time to use over 7 years? Can you please help me understand
Yeah,
that?
so the 2.4 million for 7 years includes the consumables being shipped to our schools every year for 7 years.
So will they be up? So are we getting books each year then?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, this is a consumable book. The students write in it, they mark
okay,
in it,
okay.
and they use it for that year. And then the next year, the publisher will send another shipment of books that's all included in the 2.4 million, and they will do that for 7 years.
Okay, so potentially there'll be updates each year in the book, right? The textbook.
Yeah, just to add to that, Dr. Martin, so for the digital licenses, we'll purchase a number of them. So say 250 second grade licenses. And that will be for the life of the 7-year adoption. And as our second graders become third graders, they're in a different bucket, our first graders roll up. So we're always able to use that number of licenses. Also with the physical textbooks, they ship them annually, which gives us the flexibility to inform them, particularly with the consolidation plan that is forthcoming. If a school were to close, they're not sending all 7 years' worth of books to a location. We can update them. We still have the number of books that we've agreed upon according to that grade level. We've allotted for an increase, an enrollment increase over the 7 years. But we're able to update the publisher and say, please no longer ship books to this location, and then we can adjust as we need. And it also does a price lock across the 7 years of that adoption. If something were to, some unexpected increase were to occur, we have the ability to continue to request more consumables or more licenses at that agreed upon price because of that adoption.
So even
Okay,
if,
thank you.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Slaughter?
So even if the additions change, like let's say this is first edition, 2 years it's the second edition, there's no increase in what we need to pay.
If there's a new edition of the product, that would be something that would come after this adoption. So what we're agreeing to is 7 years of these particular
Those
texts.
particular books.
Yeah, and sometimes, like the previous adoption that we had from 2017 through now, we use those books through the whole life of that adoption, and then some of those products were, as the publisher said, sunsetted. So if that happens in the life of the adoption, they will still honor that pricing. So with our last ESL adoption, they upgraded their digital platform. And so through no additional cost, they migrated us to the newer digital platform because we've agreed to have that digital access. So if they upgrade something, they'll have to honor that for us.
That was my question. Thank you.
Dr.
Can
Martin?
I follow? Thank you, because I'm having trouble hearing. So, have the teachers vetted these textbooks already?
Yes, ma'am, they have.
ESL teachers, and so you've received their approval and feedback?
Yes, so the ESL teachers and special education teachers and gifted teacher that were a part of our committee have vetted these products, and they have used a uniform rubric that, as part of our RFP, we put out to all of the publishers. These are the rubrics that we're going to be using to evaluate these products so that there's, consistency across the board. So the ESL team has used the rubrics that we provided to the publishers to review, and this textbook recommendation is the highest rated publisher from the evaluation using those rubrics.
Okay, thank you.
Ms.
My
DeCalagero?
last question. Is there any concern about relevancy? I was going through the books today, and I was reading through one of the books that had all the reading material in it, and I saw the corresponding soft book. But isn't there some concern that those books, the writing seem relatively relevant to 2026, but is there any concern about, 4 years from now, if those writings are not relevant to 2030, 2030?
Sure.
So is there, because it says, it seems like you're staying with the addition that you've agreed on.
Correct. For the life of the adoption, we would, yeah. So we're
Okay.
agreeing to a
So-
7-year commitment with this publisher. If, for me, I don't have a concern about the relevancy. I know this product particularly is aligned to the 2020 WIDA standards. WIDA may, as our SOL standards change approximately every 7 years, we update standards. So WIDA, I'm sure WIDA had 2007 standards, 2014 standards, 2020 standards. WIDA, I'm sure, will update their standards at some point in the life of this adoption, but they will do a very good job of crosswalking those standards and letting us know how their newest iteration aligns with the previous set of standards. So it is feasible that at the end of an adoption, we might be doing a little bit more work potentially if new standards come out to ensure that we use the current product that we have and make it work with a new set of standards that's issued. But that's something that I feel confident that our team could do at the close of this adoption, working towards the next one.
Ask one more question.
One more, Ms. Thomas?
Yeah, okay. Why 7 years?
Rita, or any adoption.
Yeah.
I believe in Virginia, for SOL topics, that's in Virginia code. It's in law that the Virginia Department of Education has to review and update the standards of learning. So that occurs in each topic every 7 years, and they're staggered. So 1 year, social studies might have the change of standards. Another year, it might be the science standards, but they're required by law for the SOL tested courses to review and update standards every 7 years.
No, I think I'm saying, why are you doing 7 years for the textbook? Why not 3, why not 4 years, why not 5 years? Because this is a lot of money, coming out. That's
Yeah.
what, yeah.
Well, and it locks us in for that price. So if we were to do a 3-year adoption, it could end up costing more money over, the life of those textbooks. But then we'd have to go through another internal adoption, all over again every 3 years. And this is a huge undertaking, to go through a textbook adoption locally. But at the end of 3 years, there could, the publisher may not have come out with a new edition in that time period, and then we would readopt the same book, but potentially have a higher cost. Everything's increasing in price, and so we would no longer be guaranteed that price for the.
I'm just saying, just so many years, that's all. I mean, could we see the difference of the amount that you're saying different years will probably cause different prices?
Oh, because you don't know when they're going to change their prices, because that's a future, what they're doing now is holding costs at the same for the next 7 years, whereas if we chose 3 years, more than likely to adopt after that, they will charge us more.
Yeah, but you thinking about way down the road. I'm thinking about now.
And
So money could be used somewhere else. If you was to ask them, what is 5 years versus what is 6 years versus what is the 7 years you asked for? That's what I'm saying.
we could certainly ask the publishing company to put additional quotes together for what is 3 verse 5 verse 6 verse 7. But I do agree, I think it's fiscally beneficial to lock in that many number of years, but also instructionally, when you think about putting a practice in place, your first year of implementation is sort of a trial and error. We really want to see the textbooks used and implemented for at least 3 years, if not more, so that we can really assess the effectiveness of the product and review how our teachers are implementing this textbook series. So we want to devote a number of years, not just for fiscal benefits, but also for instructional effectiveness as well.
Dr. Rose?
I was going to say, too, these monies spread out over 7 years, keep in mind they are allotted to textbook funding, meaning they can't be spent other
And on
places.
anything else?
Right, so that's important, right? So we don't have the ability to drain from this to pay on something else.
Yeah, because even at the school level, when they collect fees from lost textbooks, those money goes in a account. You all pull that out to go towards buying other textbooks, am I correct?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
How many ESEL students do we currently have in the system?
Approximately 1,900 students that require ESL services, K through 12.
You good?
Well, I'm doing the math in my head,
Okay.
and it's like
Well, remember,
300.
they're consumables, so that you got students coming in all year round,
Yeah.
all year
So
round.
it's
And
not-
then
it's not
they
a-
lose
It's not
them.
a stable population.
Yeah, they lose them, replace, and all the,
And the
all the
textbook
things.
pricing has to do with the student digital licenses and the
Right,
student
all of that.
consumables, but also how many teacher editions you
Right,
need. And so just a number of things at play. And again, trying to factor in, knowing we're going to keep this adoption for a number of years, that we want to put in some anticipated growth so that we don't have a year where we don't have enough of a particular grade level.
Okay, well, Go ahead. You good? Okay, well, thank you for that presentation. The textbook adoption will be on the next business meeting agenda on the consent agenda for adoption. Okay?
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rose, we're going to move down to 2.03, Special Education Annual Plan.
Sure. I do want to end that last presentation just by saying that I've been referring to Mr. Brady internally as Bruce from 40 Days to 40 Years Brady. So if you ever want to know more about that story, you can ask him. At this point in time, I'd like to invite Dr. Walter to the podium, please.
I think Dr. Martin had another question.
Dr. Martin, you have a question? Thank you for.
I have a statement. I didn't hear, maybe I missed this too. I didn't hear anything about where the public can go to look at, to examine these books. Are they still on display at the libraries?
Yes. Right? No? I see Ms. Basina spoke too soon.
Yeah, they were on display at the Baron Black Branch Library starting late January, early February, into earlier this month. Mid to late March, they were taken down. So they're no longer available. However, we do have copies of them at the Welcome Center, so that if anybody did want to, go and see them now, even after our recommendation has been made to the board, they could contact the Welcome Center and have access to the textbooks.
Yeah, because after seeing this meeting, parents may say, oh, I didn't know that, and yeah.
Right,
have
right.
access
Thank
to
you.
that. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Go back on mute.
All right. Good evening. Chairwoman Moore Buffalo, Vice Chair DeCalagero, members of the school board, and Dr. Rose. This afternoon, I am here to present Norfolk Public Schools Federal Fiscal Year 26 or Fiscal Year 27 Special Education Annual Plan Part B Flow-Through Application. Today, I will highlight key data trends, increased student needs, and funding priorities to support students with disabilities. Before I begin, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to Ms. London Armour, the Learning Support Budget Specialist, Learning Support team members, and to my colleagues in the Budget and Accounting offices in collaborating to develop a purposeful and strategic grant application. Not advancing? Use the mouse
There it is.
instead.
There it is down in the corner.
There we go. I can't see it. There we go. Okay. Mouse instead. Apologies. This plan is required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Virginia Department of Education regulations. We've engaged in a comprehensive review process, including collaboration with private school and homeschool stakeholders on February 19th. The plan was also reviewed by SEAC on March 24th and is scheduled for a board vote on April 15th prior to submission to VDOE. This ensures transparency, stakeholder input, and compliance. These federal funds are designed to supplement, not replace, the division's responsibility to provide a free, appropriate public education to all of our students with disabilities. This plan is fully aligned to the school board's goals, superintendent non-negotiables, division strategic plan, and all IDEA and Virginia regulatory requirements. In practice, that alignment is reflected in how funds are used. Some examples include staffing of special education teachers, paraprofessionals, and specialists to ensure service delivery, academic support through materials and resources to address literacy and math gaps aligned to board goals 2 and 4, post-secondary outcomes or transition-focused training and supports aligned to board goal 5, family engagement efforts such as a full-time parent resource center educator to strengthen communication and outreach aligned to superintendent non-negotiables 4 and 5. While the application itself is structured around federal requirements and is not outlined to tie explicitly to local board goals, the use of funds directly supports the school board's highest priorities for student outcomes. Excuse me. As a requirement of the application process, NPS must ensure that we are providing a free, appropriate public education, that each student's program is designed for them and is documented on an individualized education program, and that students are educated in an inclusive environment to the extent that their individualized needs permit. Finally, we must maintain a structure that prevents the over-identification of students in special education in general or in specific categories. This application also includes, I'm missing a slide, I apologize. I'm a slide ahead. Oh, thank you. This application also includes required fiscal and programmatic components such as maintenance of effort, which requires ensuring consistent funding levels. We also provide services to incarcerated youth and ensure equitable services for students who are parentally placed in private schools or homeschooled. These elements ensure that all eligible students, regardless of setting, receive appropriate services. I apologize, but I cannot see the screen from here to use the mouse, and the clicker's not working.
Give me the mouse.
Thank you. I was like, I can't see the screen, so, thank you. Yes. All right, though overall enrollment in NPS declines, identification of students with disabilities continues to increase. As of the 2025 December 1 child count, NPS serves 4,899 students with disabilities broken out into the primary categories displayed on this slide. Growing numbers of students with disability-based needs will continue to drive the division's staffing, services, and funding needs. I'd like to bring to the board's attention that our population of students with autism and developmental delay are experiencing the greatest growth, which corresponds with an increase in students requiring intensive academic and behavior supports. The overall student with disability population has increased by 22.5% from 3,998 to 4,899 at present between school year 21-22 and the current year. This includes a 62.5% increase in students with autism from 581 to 944 students, and a 68.5% increase in students with developmental delay from 260 to 438 students. While we are seeing an increase in students with more intensive behavioral needs, that has not resulted in an increase in IEP-driven private day placements to programs such as Rivermont or Dominion Academy. Over the past 3 years, we have consistently served between 49 and 55 students in private day programs. This year, we are serving 49 students. Instead, the division is seeing these growing needs reflected in the increase of self-contained classrooms annually over the past 5 years. NPS staffed 30 self-contained classrooms to support 379 of the 581 children with autism in school year 21-22. We are currently operating 50 classrooms, which serve 625 of the 945 identified students at present. We project the need to increase to 53 classrooms for school year 26-27. As I move into reviewing the division's funding application, it is important that the data related to growing populations of students with disabilities and an increased need for special education services is considered in the context of the federal grant, which has only seen an 8.9% increase in funding from school year 21-22 to the most recent award year of 25-26. Next slide, please. The Section 611 portion of the grants fund support K-12, or what we refer to as school-age special education services. The fiscal year Section 611Cs and proportionate set-aside application budget worksheet sections are available on this slide. Column C, the Section 611 portion, the Section 611 portion noted in column C totals $6,593,739.97. The other services noted on this slide are indirect costs for managing the grant that Norfolk is permitted to charge to all federal grants. The indirect costs were calculated based on the current state-approved rate of 4.6% and total $296,718.30. Column D. The Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, or Cs, set aside, which includes salary and benefits cost of the C staff, are noted in column D and total $1,241,245. Column E. This application's required proportionate set-aside for Section 611 to support parentally placed private school or homeschool students with disabilities living in Norfolk is noted in this column and totals $166,892.03. This area of set-aside continues to see significant increases annually, with last year's amount being $106,782.14. And then the final column, F, represents the total budget for Section 611, including the required set-asides, and total just over $8 million. Transition. The Section 611 portion of the grant application, including the Cs and proportionate set-asides, will fund the positions and services identified on the slide. Norfolk was notified that it has again been identified for mandatory set-aside of 15% of federal special education funds due to the disproportionate suspension of Black students. The board may have noted that there are substantive changes from the fiscal year 26 application, particularly to the C staffing, which is moving from 12 student interventionists to 6 intervention coaches, which I will discuss further in the next slide. As for proportionate set-aside, this is federally required for all school divisions, and funds are not discretionary. PSA is calculated based on the number of students with disabilities who are parentally placed in private schools or home schools within our city. Norfolk's increase reflects growth in that population. For context, from school year 22-23 through school year 25-26, Norfolk's total PSA is approximately $435,969, compared to just under $300,000 in one of our neighboring divisions. Differences between divisions are driven by counts for homeschooled and parentally placed private school students, not funding decisions. Next slide. The 2025-26 SEAS program data for students who have received those services has again been provided to members of the board as an attachment in board docs. Tonight, I want to highlight a consistent trend in our division discipline data that has implications for special education funding. For the current school year, as of March 13th, 26, when this data was pulled, there have been 10,859 out-of-school suspension offenses. Of those, 7,948 involved Black students, meaning Black students represented 77.5% of out-of-school suspension incidents, while making up 54.92% of the student population. This reflects a 22.58% point disparity. Looking at the previous school year, 24-25, we see a very similar pattern. There were 12,437 out-of-school suspension offenses, with 7,408 involving Black students. That equates again to a 78.37% of out-of-school suspension incidents, compared to students being 55.79% of the population. Again, a 22.58% point disparity. This is not an isolated trend. We see this same level of disparity consistently across the previous school year's data and at the state level. At the state level, 22-23 is the most current year where full data sets are publicly available. In school year 22-23, Black students were 22% of state public school enrollment, but 42% of all exclusionary discipline in Virginia. Approximately a 20% point disparity at the state level as well. Virginia's discipline disproportionality has been consistent over time. Even as overall suspension rates across the state decline, the racial gap has not closed, and 6 of the 15 C's identified school divisions for 26-27, including Norfolk, are due specifically to the oversuspension of Black students. The division was notified of C's identification and a set-aside effective the 18-19 school year. Although we were temporarily removed from mandatory set-aside as of 22-23, we remained on voluntary set-aside because the state's removal was based on COVID-impacted data. Ongoing division trends have resulted in a return to mandatory set-aside. C services have been effective for the students directly served, as should be noted by the annual reports provided to the board. However, the broader goal of reducing disproportionate division-wide discipline outcomes has not yet been achieved. The current model includes 12 student interventionist positions, which is no longer sustainable under the funding limitations of the grant. A revised model will include 6 positions and shifts from direct student intervention to a coaching model focused on building staff capacity of the teachers and educators that touch students every day. Because this represents both a reduction in positions and a significant change in job responsibilities, staff cannot be directly transitioned into these roles. The coaching model requires a different set of skills, and a selection will be based on those qualifications. While the Department of Learning Support oversees SEES, broader intervention systems such as multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, and PBIS are led by Student Wellness under Dr. Dennis Moore. Currently, the division employs 25 behavior specialists led by that department. Positions are allocated based on student need, including at our higher need schools such as Lake Taylor High, Booker T. Washington, and Ruffner as examples. Currently, 5 of the 25 positions are supported through Title I funding at the school level. Principals are trained and supported in the strategic use of Title I funds. The Title I program, led by Dr. Kelly Cito, has worked diligently to implement processes, procedures, and training for this area to include a comprehensive Title I handbook, required annual training for administrators on Title I components, and processes for use of fund and alignments of funds to school needs. This ensures that schools can effectively leverage Title I funds and may choose to allocate Title I funds to support intervention roles based on their data if this is aligned to school needs assessments. Since the 21-22 school year, the division has invested approximately $5.2 million in SEES set-aside funding for intervention efforts. At the same time, the current model, particularly staffing levels, has become financially unsustainable due to rising salary costs. Most importantly, the model, which limits the number of students that can be served to 300, must evolve to a greater system-wide impact on discipline practices. So as long as we remain in mandatory set-aside, a portion of IDEA funding is restricted, which directly impacts our ability to invest in broader instructional supports and services directly for students with disabilities. As we refine the SEES model, ongoing collaboration between learning support and departments such as student wellness, school leadership development, student support services, and Title I, as examples, will be essential to ensure alignment and sustainability. Next slide, please. That said, to summarize Section 611, again, we've seen a 22.5% increase in students with disabilities, growing from 3,998 to 4,899. More notably, specific categories are growing at even higher rates. Again, autism by 62.5% and developmental delay by 68.5%, while funding of the overall grant comparatively has only increased by 8.9%. That growth does not fully match the growing rate of student need. This means we must be strategic in how we allocate all funding resources, including operating budgets, while still maintaining compliance and providing quality service. Next slide, please. The Section 619 portion of the grant supports programs and services for preschool-aged children with disabilities, also referred to as Early Childhood Special Education Services, or ECSE. As you're aware, we enjoy our acronyms in special education. Column C represents the total 619 portion, which includes salary and benefits for funded staff, materials and supplies to support ECSE classrooms at our primary locations of Willoughby and Easton, in addition to ECSE inclusion classrooms in other schools, and the indirect cost charges. For this portion of the grant, the total equates to $269,862.87. Column E represents the required proportionate set-aside of $3,229.13 for this section of the grant to support parentally placed private school or homeschool students. And column F represents the grand total. Another transition, please. The division's Section 619 grant funds will support one ECSE teacher specialist and ECSE paraprofessional at Easton and materials and supplies, while the PSA funds are used for contract services, the same as they are under Section 611 to provide speech services to parentally placed private or homeschool students. Next slide, please. Again, we are seeing similar growth trends in early childhood populations, particularly the 68.5% increase in students identified as having a developmental delay, a disability category that only applies to children through the age of 6. However, federal funding is not keeping pace with the growing need in Norfolk and has only seen a 5.3% increase from school year 21-22 to 25-26 for this section of the grant. This grant can no longer sustain the 2 teachers and paraprofessional it was previously funding. The teacher positions have been moved to operating with the goal to eventually move the paraprofessional to operating as well. And once again, use these funds solely to supplement the division's efforts. Next slide, please. So that said, the work of learning support over the past several years has intentionally shifted to better balance compliance with a stronger focus on instruction and student outcomes. At the core, students with disabilities are general education students first. While NPS has engaged in significant Tier 1 instructional efforts to strengthen those programs, as Ms. McGarity has also shared, there is still improvement work to be done there, and our department will continue to support that work. Learning Support's responsibility is to support access to the general education curriculum while providing the services necessary for students with disabilities to make meaningful progress based on their individual needs. To do that, we have implemented a comprehensive set of initiatives and strategies focused on instruction, staff capacity, and systems alignment over the years. First, we have significantly expanded professional learning topics. Topics noted on this slide represent a small sample of areas our office has supported. Transition, please. This year, we have provided 339 learning opportunities, totaling 594 hours of professional development with over 3,800 participants. For context, last year, we offered 235 opportunities, and that number has continued to increase annually. We've also offered monthly special ed leaders labs and targeted administrator training focused on special education requirements and instructional leadership, with a clear emphasis that special education services are delivered at the classroom level, not centrally. Second, we have built targeted training pathways for high-needs areas, such as dedicated professional learning communities for self-contained teachers supporting students with intensive needs, where previously those opportunities were combined with inclusion special education teachers. We're also in year 4 or cohort 4 of professional learning, where teachers and assistants of students with autism can become registered behavior technician or RBT certified. 25 staff have been certified in Norfolk in cohorts 1 through 3. Behavior support cohorts for general and special education teachers focused on evidence-based strategies such as classroom management, active supervision, and de-escalation have also been provided. Third, we also continue to strengthen instructional tools and alignment through the adoption of a K-12 curriculum aligned to the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning for our self-contained classrooms, providing instruction to students using the state's modified standards. Collaboration with CNI to revise lesson plan templates to explicitly include specially designed instruction and accommodations, and joint learning support CNI professional development for general and special education teachers to ensure aligned instructional practices during division-wide PD dates. Fourth, we have expanded coaching and feedback systems through development of classroom observation tools, another item that Ms. McGarity mentioned. These tools focused on identifying and strengthening specially designed instruction to provide targeted feedback and supports to teachers in classrooms. That particular effort was just initiated this year and is still in the early stages. Finally, we have leveraged strategic partnerships and expertise such as ongoing collaborations with ODU and William & Mary Training and Technical Assistance Centers, or TTACs, to deliver evidence-based literacy and math strategy professional learning and coaching to teachers. Likewise, we have partnered with them to develop and provide targeted training opportunities for special education paraprofessionals, including structured learning pathways and task-based supports. We've used contract services to make board-certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, available to support staff, particularly in classrooms serving students with autism and intensive needs based on their identified needs and learning support assignment. Collectively, these efforts are designed to improve instructional quality, build staff expertise, and ensure that supports are consistently implemented across classrooms, ultimately accelerating outcomes for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. During the next board meeting on April 15th, we will be seeking your approval of the proposed plan and will submit it to the Virginia Department of Education no later than their due date of May 8th. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. At this time, I am prepared to answer questions and provide additional information to assist in your review and approval of Norfolk's fiscal year 27 annual special education grant application. I will begin with a recent question brought to my attention around the need to increase salaries for special education teacher assistants and whether opportunity exists to do so in this application. First, I'd like to be clear that as the Executive Director for Special Education Services, I wholeheartedly agree that compensation for teacher assistants is an incredibly important issue and directly impacts our ability to recruit and retain qualified staff, not just during the regular school year, but also during the summer to effectively provide extended school year services. However, It is not my recommendation that the division shift focus of this grant application and attempt to utilize these funds to increase salaries for several reasons. First, again, federal IDEA funds are intended to supplement, not replace or supplant local funding obligations. They are not guaranteed funds is the major reason. As you may have gathered from the details I've provided around Cs and PSA, there are too many variables that could reduce available funding from year to year. Compensation structures, including pay increases, must be addressed through the division's local budget process, and I would heavily support this effort. Second, the scale of our staffing makes this financially impractical within the grant. Norfolk employs approximately 300 special education paraprofessionals alone. The available federal funds in this application are already fully allocated to sustain required services, staffing, and supports for students. Additionally, that number of 300 does not include general education paraprofessionals for other areas such as pre-K, for whom increases would not be permitted under this grant due to the federal requirements. Our general education assistants also provide critical supports to students, including students with disabilities and including intensive behavior support needs. And finally, this application represents the first fully balanced grant in several years. When I assumed this role in 2020, the grant was operating at a deficit. Through careful planning, vacancy savings, and coordination with our finance teams, we have worked to stabilize the budget while maintaining services. Given these factors, there's no capacity within this grant to support salary increases without reducing required services to students. That said, I both recognize and have advocated on the importance of this issue, and compensation adjustments would need to be considered as part of the division's broader budget and staffing strategy. And at this time, I will take any additional questions that you have.
School board members, you've heard the presentation. Are there any questions? Ms. Basine.
Yes, so thank you very much for addressing that last part. I'm going to work backwards with my question. Because I think what you made very clear in your presentation is that our federal funding is not meeting the needs of our students with disabilities.
Well, I will say.
The amount of federal
Yes,
funding.
it will never, and it never has. IDEA is in its 50th year at its inception. I think the federal government always promised to supplement the cost of educating students with disabilities at 50%. They've never funded it above 25%,
Correct.
ever.
Correct.
So it's, so
Yeah.
that is important to note. And again, as you noted, just from the information that I shared, the rate at which it changes, has changed over time is very minimal. And we do not have any control over that. I can't speak to other federal budgets, grants, but with this particular application, we're not permitted to just ask for whatever we want. What we are instructed to do is to develop a plan based on level funding. And so what the state tells us to do is write our plan under the assumption that we're going to get about what we've always gotten. And that's generally been the case, as you can see, based on the 8.9% shift over time.
Correct, yes, and thank you for elaborating and sharing that. I think that's an important thing for this body to really note and take hold of, especially for those of us that may participate on state level committees, because that's something I know is part of the federal advocacy task force that I'm a part of that has come up, and I've had conversations with our congressional leaders, state Senate leaders, about the importance of this, but having the data that you've provided here is really critical. And I appreciate that. I appreciate you addressing the salary piece for our TAs. I know this is not a sustainable place to address that need, but I think as we continue to have these budget conversations that we're going to have, I think that the items that where you've had to reduce in this plan, that we really need to have a sustainable model for, especially, for our students with disabilities. We need to really look at our budget and put the funds where they need to be so that we can maintain and exceed, and so that we can actually make progress for our students. And so, not so much a question, but a statement that I'm urging all of us to consider. But with that is, do we have, I know this is not an ask for what you want, like you just stated, but if we had a real scope of what the needs are from the Cs, from the behavioral mental health supports to the instructional supports. What does that need really look like? How much is addressed through this plan? And then where in our budget do we need to, in our operating budget, do we need to really put some focus and attention there? Because I do think that we are lacking in our budget around this particular area. And that's something that I personally feel strongly about. So if you could speak a little more to, especially the Cs going from 12 to 6, if you can elaborate on what I think I heard, which was because that's really to balance the,
No,
I mean-
so, yes, one, that portion of the grant is now a mandatory set-aside, as I mentioned, because of the disproportionality. But the set-aside is limited to 15% of the grant, period. Not a penny more, not a penny less. So it doesn't grow, obviously, at the rate that the grant is growing. It's not growing at the rate that sustaining those salaries would require. But more importantly, the reason why the division is on mandated set-aside because of division disproportionate suspension of Black students. And that is not just Black students with disabilities, that's Black students across the division. We have modified the C's plan from year to year, with some bands of, hey, we've been doing it this way for a few years now. We've seen, as I said, that it impacts the students that it serves. However, when we went to this model, because the whole premise is early intervening services, we designed the model so that student interventionists could have a max caseload of 25. It's a bit challenging to say that you have students that have intensive academic and behavioral support needs, but then you assign them to interventionists, let's say like a school counselor as an example, who's carrying a caseload of maybe 200 in a high school. You cannot provide intensive services that way. So that's how we eventually shifted to the current model where we tried out the 12 interventionists providing the direct services. However, with 12 interventionists and 25 students being able to that's a total of 300 students. That is too small of a number to scale this issue of division disproportionality. So that's the major driver behind changing the plan at this point. When the division was pulled off of mandatory set-aside, I don't know, well, Ms. Basine, you were certainly on the board, and I spent some time that evening conveying that my recommendation was that we remain on voluntary.
Correct.
Because division data was not showing that the trend was really decreasing. We were pulled off because at that time, the state incorporated COVID-impacted data and pulled all the school divisions that were identified for discipline off. How that works is the way they calculate it, even though I mentioned 22-23 school year data trends match, they do that based on a 3-year trend, which is why it's been 3 years now since they pulled us off, and now 3 years later, they're saying to us, you have to go back on because they do that average of the 3 years. So of course, the years that we took off included those 2 COVID years as well. So that said, like I said, we're trying to move to a model where at the end of the day, the most impactful person, I mean, research has always borne that out, it is the teacher in front of children, you know what I mean? So our goal is to put staff in place with a high level of expertise, but also have a skill set to coach those strategies. Every excellent teacher does not translate into an excellent coach. But our goal is to shift to a coaching model so that we can build the capacity, improve employee expertise across a broader number of staff and reach a broader number of students.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, so,
Yes, Ms. Slaughter.
slide 8. I am trying to find the word here to express my,
Is it the discipline data slide?
yes,
Okay.
my deep concern with these disparities, and what are we doing to really address them? Because when we come back to this table to see these again, I really don't want to see these numbers.
You do understand that my office is not in control of division-wide discipline.
Right, I'm aware of that, but
Yes.
it's in your presentation,
Yes.
so I'm asking.
Well, again, as I was sharing that, the goal is, this definitely does require collaboration between multiple offices. This is why I shared information around behavior and intervention, mental health supports that are available through student wellness. The goal of SEAS is to supplement the division's broader efforts around this area. I would also like to see that it is decreased when I return, but absolutely, I would never stand here and disagree that that requires collaboration across the offices.
And with that collaboration, I'd like to see the outcome of that collaboration and what we're going to do to change these numbers, because
Understood.
I'm gravely concerned.
Dr. Rose?
I think you should be concerned. I think it's interesting that these presentations tonight, so we've talked about the increase in terms of learning needs of students, right? Specifically students requiring specialized services. Dramatic increases, right? I spent a couple hours this morning at Crossroads. Unbelievable what they're doing, but they're at 24% currently of students on IEPs. We're seeing increasing of behavior, right? We're not seeing decreasing, and the disparity is, we're not making a dent in that. And then when you look at the correlation that has to performance, well, that's not a Norfolk issue, that is an ongoing issue. We can almost determine how that's going to, and then we haven't even talked about attendance tonight.
Right.
Okay. So the reason I bring up those huge, significant buckets is that despite efforts of Norfolk as well as other districts throughout the country, we need at the right time to realize this is not just a school issue. This is a community-wide, parental, city, business, faith-based entity issue. And so as we move forward, we have to make sure that this isn't a finger-pointing problem. We all are figuring out a way in our strategic plan to look in the mirror, because this data, to your point, if this continues, we already know what the student performance data will look like. Because it all correlates together and follows very similar trend lines. So I'm just agreeing with you and just adding some more words to it, because the worry that I think we should have is, no matter what, regardless of funding, and funding will never meet our needs.
Right.
So we're not going to, sadly, be able to buy our way out of this.
Right.
Right? We're not going to be able to fund our way out of this, regardless of how we play the shell game with our resources, because our resources has competing needs, right? So the question is, how do we ensure that schools continue to hone and focus and become better at what we do in the spirit of continuous improvement, but we also have to rally the troops, which means our families, et cetera. We aren't going to change issues with behavior if we don't change attendance, for example. Right? That's just an example, and there are others. So I'm just trying to identify what I think is a significant challenge that is, I know we're circling around because we're talking about topic to topic, as we should. That's our job. But I just want to also shine a light on, it's not a department, it's not even just a school. This currently is a community problem in Norfolk, I believe. But we're not the only ones, but that is our job.
Thank you, Dr. Rose.
I just want to piggyback on that. I understand what
Thomas.
you're saying, Dr. Rose, but do we have all the components in our school? Because I see it as a Norfolk Public Schools issue at the top. All the other components you're talking about, that's fine, but we need to start home. We have to look at ourselves first. Do we have everything we need for our children? That's what we need to see. And I think it's some missing pieces of the puzzle in this. So we have to take ownership as Norfolk Public School.
Because we're the
First.
ones issuing the OSS.
Yes, agreed.
But I do understand that it's the village, and we need every piece of the village functioning properly, but we also need to look at, if it were this close, I could see, but it's like miles and miles
Been that way for a
apart.
while, too.
For a while. And so whatever we're doing is not working. And so we need to do something different.
And where Dr. Rose was saying, you have to look at it from the 30,000 feet level and look down.
I get that.
Yeah.
No, I get that, but I think it's time.
Yeah.
And not just
Absolutely, I
continue to
agree.
talk about doing something different. We have to, because this is, and like you said, it correlates with student outcomes because it impacts, student outcomes. And so we definitely need to be serious about addressing, right, be serious about addressing this.
Okay. Oh, yes, Mr. Calogero.
I have one last question. Are we concerned about funding being decreased at this point?
We can't hear you.
What?
Are we concerned about funding being decreased from the federal government at this point?
I have not received any indication that the grant would be decreased, but again, that does vary from year to
That's
year.
go all, yeah.
Even within that period that I described and where you've only seen an 8.9% increase, that also includes a year where it did dip a little bit in certain areas, you know what I mean? And then went back up the next year. But I don't have any concerns, even with all that's going on, around the Department of Ed and things like that, that at this time, that there's going to be any significant decreases.
Thank you.
All right, well, school board members, the time is 6:26. We still have the career and technical education plan. We can transition to that. And then we have 3.01 and 4.01. So we're going to, Ms. Goshen.
All right.
So I'm anticipating probably another, we have you up here for 15 minutes, but I know there's time for questions. So let's gauge about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes.
Well, good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, school board members, and Superintendent Rose. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you in an overview point of view of the CTE 2026-27 Perkins Plan. It has been presented for your review. This plan is what we always call every year, a lovely piece of work that is still in progress. It comes together over the course of a year, not in one sitting, but in a visit by various different internal and external stakeholders. You have your businesses, students, staff, representation from your parent, the community, different agencies, and higher education. Our CTE advisory leads a lot of the work that's done. And again, it doesn't just start with, today we're going to write the CTE plan. It is definitely a journey over the course of the school year, taking into consideration labor market information, data from our students, and trends from our different professions. As we transition to the next slide, you will see the components that go into the plan. It is academic instruction, technical education, and work-based learning. And one does not sacrifice the other. It is definitely a strong marriage between the three in order to ensure that our students are college, career, and life ready. And I'd like to put focus on life because we're preparing pre-K through 12, not just for the success of the schools of which they will matriculate through, but also their post-secondary endeavors of whatever they may choose in life. And so we're working together to make them globally competitive so they can rock when they leave us. As we transition to the next slide, it just gives you a quick overview. You've seen this before. It is the career cluster models that we utilize for placing our classes and our pathways into clusters. It is based on the national model as well as the state. The two do not complement each other in terms of the number of clusters, but they are aligned and complement in terms of what needs to be done for students. For example, the national model has just been modernized and it has about 14 clusters. The state has about 16 to 17, and we have sub-clusters that fall within. As we transition to the next slide, you will see what we do with those clusters and components and how we work on this journey to make sure that we have high-quality CTE. The items on your left give you an idea of what we have from rigorous instruction, work-based learning, career and technical education, student organizations, of which our students are doing a great job. They are competing last month and this month. Many are progressing from the state level of competition to national competitions, so we're looking forward to their success with that. We have our business community partnerships where we have those on a national, state, and local level. We always open our doors and welcome our businesses in because those partnerships which are active. You don't want partnerships that are stagnant because our kids will not learn and lead. Our active partnerships allow national, state, and local expertise and resources to be pulled into us. While we are educators and we are strong at what we do, we definitely rely on our business partners and higher education. We have an amazing relationship with Tidewater Community College, of which we do our dual enrollment. We have NSU, ODU, you name it, we are connected to them. We always want to make sure that we bring individuals into the table because they have a broader view, so we don't continue to have a narrow perspective of what's going on because they keep pace of what's going on in the industry. Our CTE components are aligned with the 3E framework. And what we really want to do is to make sure we build out a strong CTE program so that regardless of the accreditation model, we are ready for it. It's one of those things, stay ready so you never have to get ready. And the main thing is, when you look at 3E, we are in wholehearted support of it and the point system that they assign. But I want to be clear, our children are not points. Our children are people with amazing potential, promise, and passion, and so we make sure that our program reflects their needs, their interests, as well as the industry demands. But when you look at it, you can take our rigorous technical instruction and you look over and it says enrollment, that fits there. When you look at employment, that's your work-based learning, your postgraduate learning. When you look at enlistment, those are our students who will take the ASVAB. And remember, the ASVAB is not just for the military, it's for all students. They have an amazing career inventory and assessment program with the ASVAB. So we have teachers trained at all of the schools and the technical center who could administer the ASVAB. The reason why we did that was because when there was a government shutdown, there were no military personnel to test our students. And so we flipped, as the kids say, we flipped the script on that, and we made sure that we did not have to be at someone else's beck and call. We're ready to administer whatever we need. Also very key in employment as we transition to the next slide, you look at a lot of high-quality work-based learning. If you remember last year, this slide is identical with the exception. Last year, the Virginia Board of Education reworked all of the work-based learning models. We used to have 10 to 12 of which to choose from, and now we have 6. And that doesn't bother me the least bit because we're going to do the best with what we have for our students and make sure they are connected to relevant teaching and learning, but also relevant hands-on work-based learning. We now have at our disposal clinical experiences for our healthcare. Entrepreneurship goes across all clusters and classes, internships, which will remain paid and unpaid, school-based enterprises, so all of our schools will be running businesses. An example would be at the technical center, the auto body shop. We have the culinary program where they cook and they sell their meals, which we are inspected by the health department. We don't want to get into any trouble, so the health department monitors what we're doing. You have a host of students, entrepreneurs who have their own businesses, and they are very much in line with what they're studying at school. And then we have registered apprenticeship, which is our trades and industrial that allows students to go on into the world of work. The one we do not offer is the select immersion supervised agriculture. We do not have a large agricultural program. That's a lot of more of the farm-like things. We do have agricultural infusion. But as you transition, you see, to the next slide, we don't only offer high-quality work-based learning, we also offer high-demand industry credentials. This list for you looks a little different than last year because I shared with you last year, we're going through a transformation, not even a transition, a transformation. We are moving from a lot of student-based assessments to high-demand industry credentials approved by the state and national accreditation agencies. And so some of those things are now what you call industry credentials, and most of them are adult-based. So our high school students will take adult-based credentials, because when they transition, whether it's college, go on to a career or not, they need to be marketable. So you have to have a credential that directly connects to your program of study. Otherwise, student assessments will say, yes, I studied this, but it will not get you into the door for entry level. So this is just an example. There are 300. These are some of the high demand, and these also connect back to the 3E. When you see the different point systems, you understand that some of these high demands will align with that. Again, we're dealing with powerful people and our children and not just points, but I want you to see the alignment because it's real. Whether we understand it or not, or like it or not, it is real, and we are going to comply with what we need, but still we're going to move our children forward. As we transition to the next slide, this gives you a quick look at the total number of credentials achieved last year, which was 2,336. That accounts for about 1,980 students. Some students receive more than one credential. We have been working our way back since COVID. What we do is we take a look at what we took, how we did in prior years in specific ones, and what can we do better. We want to make sure that our students, that those 2,336 credentials are worth more than the paper on which they're printed. And so we are going back and we looked at it, and I think I stood here about a year ago tomorrow and ask you to have some patience with us because we are moving to a different type of credentialing, and we may have some peaks and valleys as our children get to more acclimated to the higher level, but also our teachers. So to make sure that our kids are prepared, we have to prepare our teachers. Many of the new credentials were not out when they were in school. Some of them just came out last year, so this is new to them. And so we have them taking the credentials. March 20th, PD, we had them to take the same credentials as the students would take, because how can you teach something if you've never been exposed to it? On the other side of the chart, gives you an idea of the percentage of completers who graduate from us with a post-secondary credential. And remember, a completer is someone who finished 2 years or more in a sequence and met all graduation requirements as well as got a credential. And we normally hover about 94%, 95%. As we transition to the next slide, this is something you're very familiar with. This is our budget. And remember, we do not receive our allocation for next year until normally after the application is due. So you build the budget based on this current year. You have all the details in the plan that was presented to you. As you can see, as we always have, 58%, sometimes more, goes towards equipment and technology because CTE is very expensive to run. You have to run effectively, I should say. Contract services comes in about 29%. No student in Norfolk Public Schools pays to take a credential. A credential can be $50 on up to $500. We cover the cost for our students to take those credentials as well as anything that they need in order to be eligible to take the credential. Professional development for teachers go into there, and I just spoke of our students traveling for competitions. We pay for the students who are first and second place. If someone comes in third place, we normally try to fundraise to get that done, but we cover all of the staff going in terms of one teacher for each number of students who attend. Most of them travel, like they're going to Georgia, they're going to Florida, they'll be in Indianapolis, California. Well, with the gas prices of today, those ticket prices are climbing up. Plus, there's registration and equipment for the robots and shipping them and things of that nature. Last category is 13%, and they always ask me, did you mean personnel? No. In the federal category, it's called personal services. We do not have teachers on our grant. You just cannot sustain the amount of money that they have. Plus, each year, you don't want to tie in a teaching position to that. We do have one position we put in. With the changes made for work-based learning, we need someone to support schools in doing that. We went down in work-based learning, so we need someone to help coordinate all of the things. We have OSHA requirement, child labor laws. you name it, and we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students and the business industry. And so, as you can see, that makes up the amount of funds that we have. The details that you may want to have, they are in the pages. You notice the pages are stamped draft. And the reason why they're stamped draft is we have not received our allocation. So although you hear the plan today, you will vote on the 15th. We will upload it to VDOE on the 30th. Normally, it's May 1st or April 30th. We will get our application. We have to go back and do a budget amendment, and then we resubmit. So that's why you see draft on all of those pages. It wasn't I forgot to do something. And the other thing is, some of the data pages will say draft. We normally have to utilize March 30th data for the student data collection, and this plan was presented well before the March 30th date. Those new numbers will come in, and that will be updated. So once you vote on it, it will be represented for Dr. Rosa's signature, Madam Chair's signature, and then you see on there Tidewater Community College, and some of the business community will have to sign off saying that they were an active participant in building out this plan. What's coming next, and I don't want to take up too much time as we proceed to the next slide. What's coming soon is we are well into our Computer Science Ready initiative, where we're rolling out a lot of high-level computer science for our elementary, middle, and high schools. That is aligned with the AI rollout. We do not believe in initiative fatigue or initiatives in isolation. They are all part of what we do. Innovation learning spaces for grade 5. It's grade 5 because Perkins only covers grades 5 through 12. However, as a division, we believe in the future of our students, and we provide services pre-K through 12 plus postgraduates with other funding. We are adding AP, Career and Technical Education. We're very excited about that. We piloted with the College Board this year. We'll have AP Computer Science already. We'll have AP Cybersecurity and AP Business and Economics. We are enhancing our specialty programs with CTE increases. We will expand dual enrollment for CTE. We have a host of programs to follow that, and with dual enrollment. And on another note, we now will kick off cohorts of students who will earn their associate's degree as well as their high school diploma concurrently. We're working on high-quality work-based learning, pathways redesign, our teacher cadet program we've implemented this year, and we are going after national accreditation for each of our programs because we believe in operating at the highest level. And if you do not extend yourself, you will remain stagnant, and then we are not doing right by children. So we are growing, taking the limits off of what we can do, and making sure our students have what they need. As we transition to the final slide, I am prepared to answer any questions, take any suggestions you have, because this is our plan. This is for our kids, and so we have to do what we need to do without any question or hesitation, because time isn't on their side. We have them for 12 years, and if we don't do what we need to do, they don't get a do-over for pre-K to 12. So we have to get it right the first time around, and I would love to say we're perfect and we get it right all around, but our CTE program, we're in a growing phase. We're transitioning, and so there's some things that we're doing very well, but there's some things we need to get up, dust off our boots, and get to moving. And that's all I have for you. Any questions, I'll take them and answer them to the best of my ability.
Well, school board members, you heard the presentation. I want to thank you first because I've heard the answers to my questions in your presentation, so thank you.
Okay, I like that.
That I submitted. Ms. DiCalagero, and Ms. Basine, you have a question as well? So DiCalagero, then Ms. Basine.
Just a quick question. I'm intrigued by the high school specialty programs with CTE enhancements. Can you speak to where we're going with that, or which specialty programs you're targeting?
Yes, so our students have infinite ability and promise and potential, but we have finite resources. So instead of having our specialty programs compete with CTE, we are aligning the resources. So I'll take Norview High School, only because I was there not too long ago. They have a leadership in engineering program. CTE has every leadership, every pathway for engineering. And so we are pulling those resources together in collaboration with Old Dominion University to see how we can not commingle, because we cannot do that, but how we can consolidate some of the things. So if we buy, I would say, a bamboo printer, instead of having one for one thing and one for another, we'll have a bamboo printer that we can utilize with the specialty programs, because it's the same students as well as CTE. Course offerings. A lot of times folks think just throw a bunch of courses at a school and that will make it different. It doesn't. It's about the experience within the courses. So now the LCSE students will have a work-based learning experience that will align with 3E, that will align with the federal government requires. The teachers, the CTE teachers, are the LCSE engineering teachers. They're already credentialed. So really enhancing that way. There's a Governor Health Sciences Academy we've been trying to get off the ground. Well, Maury High School's EVMS program, now that expands the ability for schools to be able to offer things. You look at Lake Taylor High School, we spend time there. Their leadership in ROTC, well, that's CTE. And so now going back and look at how we can bridge the gap between the two and make sure that we're maximizing our resources. The other thing is partnerships. You can't continue to ask one partner 5 different times for 5 different things, but if we come together with a comprehensive plan, then they're more inclined to offer funding, offer human resources, offer time, than trying to answer 5 different, well, I can give you, but I can't give you. We really just have to be smarter in what we're doing so we can get more for our students.
All right, Ms. Basine?
Yes. And Dr. Rose, did you, okay, I
was
didn't
just
know if
shaking
you
my
were
head.
trying to, okay. Thank you, Ms. Goshen, and always exciting presentation, the work that you're doing, you and your team are doing. As for the pathways, how are you, how are you monitoring whether we are meeting the goals of the pathway? And they are, can you elaborate a little bit on what that looks like?
So each year, the Virginia Department of Education negotiates with the federal government for benchmarks or targets that's set aside from all components of CTE. And so we do a data dive from the year before's data, and quarterly, we have a strategic plan just that's aligned with the division, and we set goals to make sure our students meet that. Now, with our pathways, we want to make sure that they include some of the trends and things that we need for our students to be successful. So our expert partners come in and they review our curriculum, they review our activities, they review the credentials offered, work-based learning. And so we go through annual reviews of pathways on a rotating basis to make sure that we remain current. We also do our data dives with our business partners, and they'll take a look at it. And just like for one said, you know, you all are doing really well, and you're very happy that your students are successful in this particular credential. But if you want your students to even get an entry-level job, you need to change that credential. And so we had to shift, and that was with cybersecurity. It was A+, and Security Plus. We were utilizing another one. They came in and they reviewed it, and so we shift over. So we measure data just like SOLs and everyone else. We have targets from the State Department. We are on federal monitoring reviews just like everyone else. And we have a CTE advisory that really helps us go in and look at the classes, the curriculum, and all of the things. And then the kids, if you're not doing right, now these two wonderful young ladies, I'm sure if we were not saying the right thing, they would let you know. So what we do is we survey our students. So we never bring on a program. You have to, if you're using federal funds, you have to survey students initially. And so students will give us the feedback. And several of the students who've served on the advisory here, they are CTE students. They go to the technical center, they're in classes. So, that's you.
DC.
Yeah, They are participants in all that we do, but we have to keep growing. Again, I can give a great PowerPoint and I can answer the questions with flair, but if I'm nothing, I'm honest. We still have to grow. We still have to get out of our own zone and see what's going on in the rest of the world. What you don't want is our students to graduate from the 12th grade and already be 4 years behind a profession. That's the worst thing you can do to someone. And that means changing our mindset, that of our teachers, that of our schools, and sometimes just moving folks around makes a difference. And so the professional development is key to what we're doing as well.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
I want to say something.
Yeah, Ms.
I just want to say thank you. I don't have a question, but
Okay.
thank you to you and your team. I'm out in the community
Yes,
and I
you
have
are.
not heard not one negative thing about VOTEC. Telling my age, not VOTEC, Norfolk Technical Center. Excuse me. I have, coming from the students nor the parents, I've never heard anything negative.
Well, you have one right here. I don't mean to put her on the spot right here.
So y'all doing an amazing job.
Well,
and I
thank you.
just
We
wanna
bribe
say
them, so
thank
we get
you.
the culinary students to make some cookies, and then I give them out, like, my plan is up, can you try to take it easy
Well,
on
it's
me?
working. Keep
Yeah,
doing
no.
it.
Thank you. But it's the decisions that are made here and our amazing executive leadership team, our principals and staff. It's the support of coming together and the community rallies around us. Our champions are amazing. And so it's not a me thing, it's a we thing that we get it done. But we still have a long way to go. We can't stop moving. Our kids deserve it.
Thank you, Ms. Goshen, for your
Thank you.
presentation. And again, board members, the textbook adoption, special education annual plan, and CTE education plan will all be on the consent agenda for April 15th. Okay, we're going to move down to 3.01, superintendent's contract, vote required. May I have a motion to approve Dr. Jeffrey Rose as superintendent and contract?
I move to approve Dr. Jeffrey Rose as our superintendent and to amend, approve his contract.
And his contract.
And his contract, yeah.
May I have a second?
I second.
Okay, Dr. Martin.
Meeting second.
Any discussion?
So now you're gonna have to bring cookies and
Yes.
cupcakes and brownies for us?
Yeah,
It's official?
Expectations just risen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Basine,
Aye.
DeCalagero,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Paulson,
Aye.
Slaughter,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Buffalo.
Aye. Third time's a charm. Okay, down to 4.01. You gotta have some humor. 4.01 is future agenda items. I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Rose for some comments and some suggestions, and then I'll open it up for the board members. So 4.01, Dr. Rose?
So I have some recommendations. Some of them are going to be no-brainers for the group, but I just want to make sure that, and this isn't all for one meeting, this is over the coming meetings. One, we have to recognize that we have some budget work to do, right? So we all know that we've passed our budget to the city, right? The city has not yet approved. They're going to have a public hearing in April. They will vote in May. But we also have some indications as it relates to some changes that potentially they will make to our budget. So therefore, once that occurs, we are now planning for that. And so what we will do is bring back to the board an amended budget based upon some of what we're reading in the tea leaves, and then once they approve. So there will be changes to the budget. And so we got to leave space for that, and we have some work to do. We've already started some of that work, but it's just going to take us a little bit of time because there are going to be some pretty significant pivots, I think is the best way to describe it. So that's a topic. Another one is we already know when the time is right. We've all agreed to go through kind of a board and superintendent communication and working agreements. When the time is right, we'll do that. The CAB structure. Right, one thing I have mentioned to the board, and this is a board topic because it will translate to staffing. And so that I am currently doing some work on CAB's structure that I will bring to the board to create clarity for approval so that when we fill positions or move positions, it is aligned to what we've all agreed upon. So that's another topic coming, definitely in the board's role. I also wanted us to do some work on, and by the way, these next two topics, I'm going to create cross-departmental teams or task forces, not just coming from one department, but we are going to create cross-team task forces. Number one, I want us to bring a recommendation for your modification on some changes to our chain of command policy. I've noticed that there are a variety of things that are bubbling up to all of our levels as it relates to challenges, some concerns, and I think we can create more clarity, how we document follow-through, and so I would like to, with this team, bring a recommendations in terms of language to be discussed, modified, and then potentially approved to the board. And then one other thing that this won't require a vote. It's more of a standard operational procedure. But we're also going to create another task force throughout our departments to work on our steps and protocols reacting to school threats. Right? And so as we do that, that'll be a standard operating procedure. It won't require a board vote, but it will require board understanding, community understanding, and then, you know, consistent staff and leadership understanding throughout Norfolk Public Schools. So I wanted to bring those. I know it's a long list, not all in one meeting, but I do think they are very aligned to clearly board work, your role in governing our school system, and also what I think are some topics that I know need some immediate attention. So I didn't mean to give a long list. I just wanted to make sure I brought those to the table.
Okay. And is Dr. Martin not there?
She texted to say that she had to leave the meeting.
Okay. Well, I just wanted her to know that I still had heard, she had mentioned the board, some training around data and that. So those are ongoing on the list, those that have previously been shared. Ms. Slaughter, you?
Yes, I have a
Okay.
small list,
So-
not as long as Dr. Rose's. But, so I, and I'm not sure if this is the correct, hopefully this is, if not, let me know. A communication plan around redistricting. I'd like to see what that's going to be. And part of that is maybe having a hotline or an email address where people can send questions and have someone dedicated to get back within a timely manner to make sure that that's done. And possibly a website. That's not my area of expertise. And then I want to make sure that principals are involved in, and Dr. Rose and I spoke about this the other day, involved in the placement of teachers who are moving from schools, because the principals are the one, you know, if a teacher is in their building, then they know that teacher well, much better than we do. And so making sure that principals are involved in placement of teachers who have to leave schools and go to other schools, whether they're following their students or not. And to go back to the communication plan, also to incorporate more opportunities to have gatherings or whatever we're calling them with parents and teachers and staff members and all staff members, not just teachers, who are going to be shifted around, and understanding what that is really going to look like and making sure that they understand step by step what's taking place.
So that will be more of a school-based thing, maybe?
Well, I think
Maybe we can
most,
talk about it.
I think the most effective way, and I know too, Mr. Seen, maybe you go first, then I'll follow up, because I do think that there's some potential as it relates to what I would recommend that the board consider, because this is going to be many years, right? I do have some thoughts on a policy that guides staffing and holds us accountable to certain steps, and I can talk about that in more detail, but I don't want to, Ms. Pacini had her hand up, so.
Ms. Basine, then Colonel Polson,
Yeah.
and then DeCalagero.
Right, and I appreciate that comment, because I was going to say, I know we're talking about future agenda items, but I do think these are very important pieces that we do put in policy as to what that looks like, setting expectations that are very clear for
And
us.
communicating.
And in communicating what we're doing. And to that end, I had asked some questions around, we have this long-range facilities steering committee that is, that we have put together, and also setting, putting in policy, just like we do with our other committees, what it is our roles and responsibilities and what the expectations are, so that everyone is clear about when they are brought in, how they will be used to communicate what it is that we are doing, and how do we maintain that engagement, so everyone is on the same page with that. So, that's something I would like to see. As for agenda topics, the other thing, we had an equity audit done, I think it was in 2022, maybe the report out was a little later, but one of the things, a lot of the discussion that we've been having, and reviewing the special ed plan, the CTE plans, and just where we are today, that equity audit was done at a time where I don't think that the auditors had full access to our buildings, because we were still operating under some pandemic restrictions at the time. And so it produced some real, I think, good recommendations that I would like for us to look at and see what we may need to do to enhance and just re-examine, do another needs assessment of where we are, so that we can, and I think that would be an important step, and Dr. Rose probably is already thinking about this as we start thinking about new strategic plan and setting new goals and things like that in the future. So, and you already talked, and I was going to say, can we set up some expectations around how we're going to address the budget, but you've kind of touched on that, so that was it for me.
Polson?
Tonight's been an interesting conversation, and we're talking a lot more tonight about the future, and we're looking at things differently. We're most of the time I see, understand, we're kind of watching what's happening at the operational level, things like that. But tonight, we're getting out there, we're starting to think of things. And one of those things another thing we need to look for is when the teachers unionize. And I had a conversation with Dr. Rose about that I don't think anybody's really, some of you have had some experience, but across the board, it's going to be another twist and another thing that we should, not now, but at some point, put it on the target to go. We're going to have to do something, get smarter. Negotiating with a union is not fun.
Yeah, I've heard conversations that regionally collective bargaining is something that, you're right, Colonel Polson, that we have to have some foresight into, so, yeah.
The CBU, they call it CBU, Collective Bargaining Unit. And once that one is picked, it's not going to be two unions, it'll be one.
No, it has to be
Just
one.
of them.
You're correct.
And
We have two.
having to develop that relationship be something we should put on there somewhere.
Well, that's an interesting altogether when our body does not generate revenue.
Well, we
That's
can't.
we can't. So it's just an interesting conversation.
If I can say one thing to that, I'm just agreeing. I think that collective bargaining in Virginia, for what I've learned so far, is going to be interesting, right? In that there's a little bit of a collision between the interest and the intrigue and, us living in a right-to-work state. And so how those two things are going to, what the interplay is going to be like, will be interesting. But nonetheless, clearly there is an interest in that's coming down the pike. And so I'm agreeing that us getting ahead of that and thinking about how do we create systems and structures that will allow us to engage in those conversations with limited dollars that we're not able to generate. The city will be in the same boat, by the way. It's not just the district. So it's an interesting conversation we may have with the city.
Yeah.
And then also, Ms. Slaughter, Ms. Basine, your comments, I do think in what I've seen in my past experience when it comes to redistricting and closing buildings, I think one of the healthiest way is to go through a board discussion to create policy specific to criteria. What is the criteria that the governing body wants the staff to go through in the process? You don't want to be too specific, right? But you want to create criteria that when we bring a recommendation, it's not based upon, here are the lines we've drawn for the following reasons. This is how we followed the board criteria through the process, which could include engaging in a community specific to communications, right? So we're getting advice from our public specific to communications. But there's a role in that, to your point. So I think the healthiest way for a governing body in something that's going to last for years is to create clarity of criteria to hold us accountable to.
Right. It's finished.
I yield.
After our school board meeting last month, I had a staff member from one of the closing schools come up and give me a letter. And she is not receiving any placement help. So I'd like to see a report on not just teacher placement, how that is going, but staff placement and what supports we're giving to staff members who are being displaced because of the school closure.
We will accommodate.
I think that you harped on that.
I spoke on that very thing you talking about at the
Harped on that
last
last
meeting.
time.
And it's been several letters and emails to me that a lot of, they're not placed. They do not have a guaranteed position in August. They don't have a school. So that's an issue. That's a major issue. Because we've been told one thing, but it's actually something else is going on.
Or we're being talked to about the teachers, but we really haven't been talked to about the staff.
Yeah, we'll create a report, and then from that'll create discussion. And to your point, a specific report. So, and some of that, we can talk about. We can't necessarily talk about in a public session, but we can do some reporting on that to the board, and that's a very fair request.
Is there anyone else? Young ladies have anything? That was a lot of information.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have one more thing. I know that we talked about some things that we are going to implement to help students transition, whether they're leaving a school or their school is closing or they're being shifted. I'd like to see that. I'd like for us to see that as well because, our kids are going to need a lot of support, especially because they've created family, communities, and villages where they currently are. And we want to make sure that, they can move as closely with that village. Because what we don't want to see is student outcomes regress because of the shifting and redistricting that we're going to engage in.
Can I say something? Dr. Rose, how realistic is this? All that we saying, the communication piece, the placement, all that. We're already in April. It's April. And we're talking about school ends next month. No, May, the end of May. Yeah, next month. And school gonna be starting up in August. So how realistic is trying to get all this piece together now?
Yeah, not our entire list. We're going to be able to get in there quickly. We'll have to prioritize based upon timing. Like, so for example, one thing that was brought up, a report specific to, our staffing and our people. Well, that we need to the board needs to hear about soon by likely our next meeting, right? When we talk about communication plans relates to students transitioning, that is around the corner. So We want to make sure, and that is something we can produce because that has been thought through. So we're going to have to lay these out over the coming months, but prioritize some earlier rather than later. Like the collective bargaining, to that point, I fully agree with Colonel Paulson that this is something we have to, we don't want to be surprised by. But it's also not something that we have to go into July for, right? So, yeah, we'll lay them out little by little.
If I may ask.
Yeah.
The report you were asking about, the
the
Yeah, it was
equity.
an equity
yeah,
audit.
was that, did that include the student support services? There was a report that was supposedly put out in 22 that had to do with their manning, their I'll get some information. I was interested in that, and I asked about it, and it's been overcome by other.
If you can follow up with what that was called and.
No,
I
no,
can- Yeah, I can look through, but the one, so we do an annual, like, we get the equity review, like, that we recently, I think, got in the fall, winter, sometime this year, that is really it's aligned with our equity policy, what's in there. But this was a broader equity audit that was done, that included, several areas, including discipline, if that's what you're
No,
asking.
but it could be wrapped up, and there was one that was mentioned to me multiple times lately about whatever happened to this report that was, or it could have been an audit. I mean,
Okay, well, if you-
I'm going to have to find out.
If you can find out, I probably can locate it quickly, but,
You're a researcher, right?
well, and I can, because I know you asked for a copy of that equity audit, whatever, but
We'll find out what.
we'll find out what it was, yeah.
Okay, board members, we're at the end of our agenda with no other business. This meeting is adjourned.